Chapter 1106. As the Eastern Region Advisor, Lu Sanjin's status in the Imperial Sky Pavilion was not low. Even though Chu Xiu and Yin Lingzi were outsiders, they could sense the strange atmosphere between the two of them when Lu Sanjin used an interrogative tone. Chu Xiu was also secretly looking at Zhong Qiushui. His impression of Zhong Qiushui could only be described in one word: unfathomable. Although Zhong Qiushui had not reached the martial immortal realm, he was still at the peak of the heaven and earth profound enlightenment realm. With Chu Xiu's current cultivation, he dared to fight ordinary heaven and earth profound enlightenment realm cultivators, but when facing Zhong Qiushui, he still could not figure out his opponent's strength. In the lower realm, Chu Xiu had only felt this kind of feeling from one person, and that was Yi Shaonan, after refining the demon seed. This existence, who was once on par with the pavilion master of the Imperial Sky Pavilion, was really not someone easy to deal with. At this time, Lu Sanjin changed his usual frivolous appearance and said tit for tat, "The martial arts exhibition hasn't started yet, so what's the hurry? The pavilion master told me that I can't participate in this martial arts exhibition, so he asked me to find a friend to take the lead. See, I went to find him now." Zhong Qiushui glanced at Chu Xiu and Yin Lingzi. In an instant, a huge pressure had already attacked them. Chu Xiu furrowed his brows slightly, and a faint demonic aura rose around him, isolating him from the pressure. Yin Lingzi, who was next to him, also bloomed with a seven-colored glow, isolating the pressure. Seeing this scene, Lu Sanjin stepped forward directly, stood in front of the two, and said coldly, "Vice Pavilion Master, what do you mean by this? I found these people to help my Imperial Sky Pavilion, not to be wronged here." Zhong Qiushui said lightly, "What's the hurry? Can this senior still bully these junior cultivators? Since you want them to help my Imperial Sky Pavilion, I have to see if they have the qualifications and strength to do so. Where did these two youngsters come from? Although you have many friends, are you sure any of them are willing to form a grudge with High Heaven Sect just to help you?" Lu Sanjin pointed at Yin Lingzi and said, "This is Yin Lingzi from Lingbao Temple." Yin Lingzi smiled and nodded at Zhong Qiushui. He was not angry at Zhong Qiushui's probing just now. Zhong Qiushui was surprised. Silver Spirit's son with natural Dao aura? Although Zhong Qiushui was a martial artist of the older generation, he had also heard of Yin Lingzi's name. After all, Yin Lingzi was the only Daoyuoshan who had been personally accepted by the Dao Master as a disciple, or more accurately, as a successor to his legacy. Yet the Dao Master had still rejected Yin Lingzi. Lu Sanjin coughed and said, "But this time, Daoist brother Yin Lingzi is only here to watch the fight." If Daoist brother Yin Lingzi were to participate in this fight, it would cause High Heaven Sect to hold a grudge against Spirit Treasure Temple. Brother Chu Xiu is the one fighting on my behalf. He's Gu Zun's successor. His status and strength are enough to represent the Imperial Heaven Pavilion in the battle. I've already made him our Imperial Heaven Pavilion's guest elder. Gu Zun's successor? Zhong Qiushui glanced at Chu Xiu suspiciously. He did not expect that Lu Sanjin would even be able to hook up with the Gu Zun's successor. "May I ask which Gu Zun's successor is he?" Chu Xiu did not reply, so Lu Sanjin said, "Brother Chu, it's a little difficult to reveal the identity of your lineage as there's an enemy who once defeated the founder of his lineage. So, you must wait until Brother Chu defeats that successor and redeem yourself before you can reveal your name." Before Zhong Qiushui could speak, a young cultivator from Imperial Heaven Pavilion sneered, "What a joke! Lu Sanjin, do you believe such words? If he says he's the Gu Zun's successor, then he's the Gu Zun's successor. Any Tom, Dick, or Harry can say they're the Gu Zun's successor." Lu Sanjin said coldly, "Huang Ju, it's not your turn to speak here. The martial ancestor of Brother Chu's branch has a strong background. He's familiar with the two Dao Masters of Spirit Treasure Temple, Qing Yun and Ziyang, as well as Reverend Crimson Afterglow before the Great Ancient Calamity. Brother Yin Lingzi can testify to this." Everyone present glanced at Yin Lingzi. Since Yin Lingzi stood there without saying anything, with Spirit Treasure Temple's endorsement, this Chu Xiu should be the real deal. At this moment, Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Brother Lu, Previously you invited me to join Imperial Heaven Pavilion as a foreign elder, but this is the first time I've heard of it. Is this the treatment a foreign elder receives? Putting aside the fact that I've been suspected, I've actually become a Tom, Dick, or Harry now. Lu Sanjin's expression changed as well. He did not want to offend Chu Xiu because of these matters. He was the one who found Chu Xiu. In the future, when Chu Xiu became the foreign elder of Imperial Heaven Pavilion, he would naturally stand on his side. Offending Chu Xiu was probably what Zhong Qiushui and the others wanted. However, at this moment, Zhong Qiushui waved her hand and said, "Chu, you don't have to feel so aggrieved. Although a foreign elder is a foreign elder, the treatment our Imperial Heaven Pavilion gives to foreign elders isn't that bad. We've paid such a high price. What's the matter? Can't you just interrogate and test the foreign elder's character?" Chu Xiu scoffed softly and said, "Deputy Pavilion Master, I don't care about the conflicts and enmity between your Imperial Heaven Pavilion, and I can't be bothered. However, if someone tries to burn the fire on my head, don't blame me for being impolite." Who was the one who said I was a Tom, Dick, or Harry just now? Chu Xiu looked at Huang Ju. His aura was piercingly cold like a sharp blade as it sliced through the air, causing a crisp sound to be heard. At a time like this, it was not Chu Xiu's turn to keep a low profile. After all, his current identity was Gu Zun's successor. Everyone was a dragon and phoenix among men, and they were all extremely talented. It would be strange if someone like him could tolerate being called a Tom, Dick, or Harry. Moreover, when Chu Xiu was in the lower realm, he was already the leader of the Devil sect. He was a prominent figure in the Devil Path who was seen as a great enemy by the Taoist sects and Buddhist sections. Even if Ramashutzi came, they would not dare to point at Chu Xiu and call him a Tom, Dick, or Harry. That would not only be an insult to Chu Xiu, but it would also be an insult to themselves. However, to Chu Xiu's surprise, a golden light flashed around Huang Ju and blocked Chu Xiu's aura. He stepped forward and sneered disdainfully, "Ignorance is not a crime. Is Gu Zun's successor really that petty? Very well, I would like to see for myself what kind of person the legendary successor of Gu Zun is capable of." As soon as Huang Ju's voice fell, blinding golden qi shone around him. He drew upon the power of heaven and earth and turned into golden runes that circled around him. This young man, who seemed to be about the same age as Chu Xiu, had a cultivation base at the peak of spiritual refinement state. Zhong Qiushui said faintly, "That's great. Since you weren't here this time, I was going to let Huang Ju replace you. Now that you've found a helper, let's let Huang Ju test his skills. Cultivation base is not equivalent to combat strength. Gu Zun's successor is indeed talented, but there are many who have practiced martial arts for their entire lives and still do not know how to fight in the end. No matter what his identity is, since he has become the Imperial Heaven Pavilion's guest, he'll represent the Imperial Heaven Pavilion to fight. If he's too pathetic, it'll be the Imperial Heaven Pavilion's disgrace." Hearing Zhong Qiushui's words, Lu Sanjin hurriedly transmitted a message to Chu Xiu, saying quickly, "Brother Chu, be careful. Don't be fooled by this Huang Ju's arrogant, egotistical, and idiotic appearance. This fellow is not easy to deal with. He fought his way up from the bottom of the Imperial Heaven Pavilion. Before he was 15, he followed a county governor to suppress the sect's riots. In the end, he was valued by the vice pavilion master and kept by his side. His strength was forged from fighting with the sword and saber. Back then, he even fought with me for the position of the East Region Wayfarer, but I defeated him. However, all these years, he's been kept by the vice pavilion master's side to cultivate. Who knows if he has any trump cards?" Before Lu Sanjin could finish speaking, Chu Xiu took a step forward and threw a punch. When the punch was thrown, the entire hall seemed to tremble. The gold-and-silver true fire of inner energy and the pitch-black flames of devastation swirled around Chu Xiu's fist wind like a tornado that tore the heavens and earth apart. The fist intent of the punch was extremely domineering, as if it was the only one in the entire world. The moment Chu Xiu's punch landed, everyone's expressions, including Zhong Qiushui's, changed. Perhaps Qinqing Di was not the first to think of the cultivation method of tempering one's body with true fire, but Qinqing Di was the first to succeed in using it. Even in ancient times, no one had tried such a crazy method, especially in the Daluotian Empire, where the qi of heaven and earth was abundant. There were too many opportunities to advance, and very few people would even think of this seemingly crazy method of cultivation. Now, Chu Xiu's punch seemed to have unleashed the physical strength of the true fire to the extreme. The punch shattered the heavens and earth, and the powerful force caused Huang Ju's expression to change abruptly. Countless ways to block and dodge flashed through his mind in an instant, but there was only one result, and that was that he could not dodge or block it. Almost in the blink of an eye, the powerful force had already arrived in front of him. It was an extremely simple punch, without any changes, but it was more terrifying than those complicated martial arts techniques. Huang Ju shouted, and the runes that glowed with golden light around him condensed into a large seal in front of him, drawing the power of heaven and earth to meet Chu Xiu's punch. This was the Imperial Sky Pavilion's secret martial arts technique, the Imperial Sky Seal. The Imperial Sky Queen of Earth, controlling all things. However, all of this was useless in the face of absolute power. The punch landed, and the seal shattered. A powerful force suddenly exploded with the two of them as the center. Zhong Qiushui, who was standing at the side, waved his hand and set up a realm. When the force collided with the realm, there was a series of explosions. Chu Xiu's figure remained where he was, but Huang Ju had already been sent flying dozens of feet away by the punch. He resisted the urge to fall to the ground, but he had just taken a step when he spat out a mouthful of blood. The entire place fell silent at once. Lu Sanjin's mouth was agape, and he forcefully swallowed his last warning to Chu Xiu to be careful. Monster, he was definitely a monster. Although Huang Ju's status in the Imperial Sky Pavilion was not as high as his, the Eastern Region Wayfarer, he was still a top-notch figure among the younger generation. However, Huang Ju could not even block a single punch from Chu Xiu. What kind of monster did he bring back? Chapter 1107. One could say that Chu Xiu's punch had stunned everyone present. Lu Sanjin was even glad that the Silver Spirit Child had appeared when he and Chu Xiu were fighting earlier, so the two of them did not really fight. Otherwise, he would not have been able to withstand the power of Chu Xiu's punch without using that thing. Moreover, Lu Sanjin was certain that Chu Xiu had not used his full strength yet. This was because he saw the broken scabbard hanging on Chu Xiu's waist. He did not understand why the descendants of Guzun, who mostly looked like ascetic cultivators, would carry a flashy scabbard inlaid with purple gold and jade. This might be Chu Xiu's personal preference. However, Lu Sanjin was certain that since Chu Xiu carried a saber with him, the saber hidden in the flashy scabbard was definitely not a decoration. A cultivator who used a saber was already so terrifying even before he drew his saber. One could only imagine how powerful he was. Although her own disciple had vomited blood from Chu Xiu's attack, Zhong Qiushui did not get angry, nor did she find trouble with Chu Xiu by bullying him. He was the deputy pavilion master of the Imperial Sky Pavilion, so he was magnanimous. He merely took a good look at Chu Xiu and said calmly, "Very well. You'll represent the Imperial Sky Pavilion as the finale of the martial arts exhibition this time." As soon as he was done speaking, Zhong Qiushui waved his hand and got someone to take the injured Huang Ju away. After everyone else had left, Lu Sanjin came up to him and sighed. "I didn't expect Brother Chu's strength to be so terrifying. Fortunately, I didn't fight you back then. Otherwise, I don't know if my weak body would have been able to take it." Chu Xiu only smiled and said nothing. He would not take Lu Sanjin's words seriously. Ever since he had pushed the heaven's sun gazing at air to its peak when he faced the head-piercing 7 arrows, his experienced spiritual senses had become extremely sensitive. He was certain that Lu Sanjin's ability was not as simple as he appeared to be. This Eastern Region traveler from the Imperial Sky Pavilion must still have a trump card. By the way, Brother Chu, I still have to tell you the rules of the martial arts competition. In fact, there are no rules, but you have to pay attention to one thing. This time, everyone is fighting to determine the winner and loser, not to fight to the death, so you can't be heavy-handed. Speaking up to this point, Lu Sanjin smiled bitterly and said, "Last time, because I used a heavy hand, I was scolded when I went back and was banned from participating in this martial arts exhibition." Lu Sanjin was really afraid that Chu Xiu would use a heavy hand in the martial arts practice. Although he hadn't known Chu Xiu for a long time, he could tell that Chu Xiu was a ruthless person. Back in Fanglin County, when he was a guest elder of the Nine Phoenix Sword sect, he was very decisive in killing people. He even came up with a vicious plan for Jianghu. Of course, it may have been a good idea for Jianghu, but to the entire Fanglin County, it was extremely vicious. This kind of way of doing things was enough to prove that Chu Xiu was not a kind person. A person's personality and martial path usually complemented each other. Based on Chu Xiu's personality, Lu Sanjin was sure that he would not go easy on him. Chu Xiu waved his hand casually and said, "Don't worry, I know the severity of the situation. I'm not the kind of person who likes to kill. Once I make a move, I will fight to the death." Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Lu Sanjin nodded and said, "All right, Brother Chu, go and rest with Brother Yin Lingzi first. Tomorrow I will bring you around High Firmament City. There's actually nothing much to see here, but since it's your first time here, you can look around casually." At this moment, on a 9-story building outside the Imperial Sky Pavilion's main hall, a young man dressed in a white brocade robe embroidered with golden dragon patterns looked in the direction of the Imperial Sky Pavilion's main hall. He raised his brows slightly and said, "There are people fighting at the Imperial Sky Pavilion? Go and find out what's going on." The man was handsome, but his brows were raised extremely high. The arrogance in his eyes seemed to be innate and would not disappear no matter how hard he tried. A moment later, a disciple returned and reported, "I found out that the Imperial Sky Pavilion's Lu Sanjin will not be participating in the martial exhibition this time, so he found a good friend of his to be the Imperial Sky Pavilion's guest retainer to represent him in the martial exhibition. I also heard that this guest retainer is a prime sovereign's successor. However, Lu Sanjin and Vice Pavilion Master Zhong Qiushue have always been on bad terms. It seems that Zhong Qiushue doubted that this person could represent the Imperial Sky Pavilion, so the two sides tested each other out. In the end, the prime sovereign's successor won. Although the Imperial Sky Pavilion's main hall was filled with their own people, this was High Firmament City after all. It was very easy for them to find out what was going on here. The young man's lips curled into a faint smile and said, "What a pity that Lu Sanjin won't be able to participate. Junior brother Zhong Lu, it seems that I won't be able to avenge you. It's a pity that I was in retreat during the last martial exhibition. Otherwise, the one who would have been crippled might have been Lu Sanjin." There was another young cultivator next to the young man, and his face darkened slightly when he heard this. He was the disciple whose cultivation was crippled by Lu Sanjin during the last martial exhibition because of his foul mouth. However, his master had a very high status in High Heaven sect, so he asked for a 9 revolutions divine pill to reconstruct his meridians. Although he managed to recover some of his cultivation, it was not even half of what it was before. The young man in front of him did not dare to provoke him when his cultivation was still at the same level, but now that he saw this young man expose his scars, he could only sullenly say, "It doesn't matter, my personal grudge is just a small matter. This time, I still need to rely on senior brother Shenyuan to defeat the Imperial Sky Pavilion and wipe away our previous shame." Senior brother Shenyuan nodded directly and said, "Yes, when I wasn't here last time, you bunch of wastes actually lost so miserably. How useless." Upon hearing this, many of the High Heaven sect disciples present almost suffered internal injuries. Although this senior brother Shenyuan was strong and what he said was indeed true, saying it in front of so many people, "Did you even consider our feelings?" However, they also knew this young man's character, and they were indeed not his opponents, so they could only silently accept the title of waste. The next day, Lu Sanjin called Chu Xiu and Yin Lingzi early in the morning to go to the largest restaurant in High Heaven City, the 9-story tower, to eat. Everything in High Heaven City was run by High Heaven sect, and this 9-story tower was the same. Although High Heaven Tower only had 9 floors, each floor was more than 10 meters high, and the interior was unusually gorgeous and majestic. The white jade-like floor could even be used as a mirror. Chu Xiu had always been puzzled by high heaven sect's aesthetic standards. They seemed to blindly pursue grandeur and magnificence. This place was a restaurant for eating, so why did it have to be so grand and solemn? It would affect one's appetite. The last 3 floors of High Heaven Tower were not open to the public, and only the real high-level members of High Heaven sect could enter. So Lu Sanjin directly led the 2 to sit on the 6th floor. After ordering a lot of dishes, Lu Sanjin introduced, "These guys from High Heaven sect are actually very boring, and their cooking is the same. Their dishes are very rough, and there is no technical content at all. The only thing that is more interesting is that all the ingredients used are exotic delicacies produced in the Di Luo mountain range, and if you are lucky, you can even eat the meat of high-rank vicious beasts." Saying this, Lu Sanjin also glanced around, winked, and whispered, "Now is the time for the martial arts competition between the 2 sects. If it was on a normal day, there would be foreign singers and dancers performing here. Although they are singers and dancers, in fact, when they meet young talents, it is also common for them to offer themselves to sleep with them. Brother Chu, Brother Yin Lingzi, you are absolutely qualified. Now there should be some singers and dancers who have not left. Do you need me to help you find a few?" Yin Lingzi smiled and shook his head. This little Taoist does not approach women. Lu Sanjin was surprised. When did your Tao sect start to pay attention to this kind of thing? Did you learn it from those bald donkeys in the West? Yin Lingzi shook his head and said, "Second martial uncle said that women are tigers, you can't touch them, you can't touch them. Love is difficult to overcome, like subduing dragons and tigers. Without this kind of state of mind, don't enter the gate of love." Lu Sanjin touched his nose and said, "In fact, you can ignore love and only talk about money, a pure physical relationship is the best." Yin Lingzi continued to shake his head. Second martial uncle also said that in the mortal world, it is easy to lose one's state of mind. Of the 2 words lust, love, comes first, lust comes second. Don't mix it up. Lu Sanjin was thoroughly impressed. This was obviously a very romantic matter, but he was actually discussing it with Yin Lingzi in a serious manner. "Your second martial uncle is a genius. I heard that Spirit Treasure Temple is good at producing geniuses. It really is a well-deserved reputation." Lu Sanjin turned his eyes to Chu Xiu. "Brother Chu, do you need one? Rest assured, I will definitely choose a good one for you. You have been cultivating hard in the mountains and forests for decades, and now that you have finally come out, why don't you let go of yourself?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "I also abstain from lust." Lu Sanjin was stunned. Did these 2 like to learn from those bald donkeys in the West? Chu Xiu glanced at him and said, "Don't forget, the martial arts practice is in a few days. Is it appropriate to waste your energy on women at this time? Did you do the same when you participated in the martial arts practice last time?" Lu Sanjin coughed awkwardly. He did not dare to do this during the martial arts practice last time, because it was the pavilion master who personally came with people, and he was closely watched. However, it was also the pavilion master's fault that he was so heavy-handed. If it wasn't for the fact that he was so strict, causing him to be filled with anger, he would not have been so heavy-handed during the martial arts practice. Just as Lu Sanjin was about to say something, a voice suddenly sounded. "Anyway, the result is that you will lose. It doesn't matter what you do before the martial arts practice, there is no need to be so nervous." Chu Xiu frowned slightly. He did not see the face of the person who spoke, but the arrogance in the tone was already overwhelming. Moreover, this person's tone was not just brainlessly arrogant, but full of confidence. Chu Xiu did not like to deal with such people, because usually their brain circuit was not quite the same as that of ordinary people, and it was easy for them to be swayed by emotions. However, hearing this voice, Lu Sanjin's face suddenly darkened. Xinyuan Wushuang. Why did this guy come out of seclusion? He is really annoying. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. Xinyuan? This was the first time he had seen such a powerful surname. Chapter 1108. When Chu Xiu saw Xinyuan Wushuang, he could almost guess what kind of existence he was. He was so arrogant that he didn't take anyone seriously. However, Xianyuan Wushuang had the qualification and strength. Chu Xiu cultivated true fire body refining and true fire refining, so his strength was comparable to that of a profound enlightenment realm expert. But it was only comparable. Except for Ling Yunzi, who had just stepped into the profound enlightenment realm, most of the others were stronger than Chu Xiu in terms of strength. However, Chu Xiu had never seen anyone in the true fire spiritual cultivation state who could compete with him in terms of strength and foundation. Even Kang Dongming, the sword sage of the East Sea, was no match for him. But now Chu Xiu saw that Xianyuan Wushuang's strength was not inferior to Chu Xiu's. Lu Sanjin secretly transmitted his voice to Chu Xiu. "Brother Chu, be careful of this guy who looks like he has a mental problem, although in fact, he does have a mental problem." Chu Xiu asked, "His surname is Xianyuan? A descendant of the human emperor?" Anyway, Chu Xiu had never seen the surname Xianyuan in the mortal world. It only existed in the legends of primitive times. It was said that the ancestor of the human clan was surnamed Xianyuan. Lu Sanjin curled his lips and said, "A descendant of the human emperor? This surname is given by him, and even his name is given by him. According to him, he is the most unique existence in the world, unparalleled in the world. How can his surname be the same as others? How could a normal person do such a thing? Isn't this a mental problem? But although this guy has a mental problem, he is a complete monster. It is said that he was born without meridians. He has no meridians all over his body, so he can't cultivate any true qi at all. When he was first brought back to High Heaven Sect, the person in charge of recruiting disciples was scolded by his superiors for bringing back a piece of trash. However, High Heaven Sect was quite generous and did not drive him away directly, instead planning to drive him out after he reached adulthood. Who would have thought that although this guy couldn't cultivate true qi in the beginning, he relied on an introductory cultivation technique to forcefully open up a new path, allowing the power to circulate in every part of his body. He didn't have meridians, but his flesh and bones were meridians, so his true qi accumulation and operation were amazing. Almost no one in that group of disciples could compare with him. At that time, Xianyuan Wushuang was less than 10 years old. Later, he was accepted as a direct descendant of High Heaven Sect, and along the way, his cultivation advanced by leaps and bounds. Any martial arts ancient book that fell into his hands, he could learn it in an hour, achieve minor accomplishment in a day, and comprehend 90% of its essence in just 3 days. Although this guy had some mental problems, it had to be said that he was really a genius in martial arts. I didn't of him of Xian Wushuang of Xianyuan Wushuang. I didn't expect that he would come out. After listening to Lu Sanjin's information, Chu Xiu was also a little surprised. When he was in the mortal world, he had seen many geniuses. For example, LV Fengxian, who had amazing luck, 7th young master Feng, who had a natural sword Dao, Zhang Qingzhen, who had condensed the golden core of thunder, and Zhong Xian, who had cultivated the Bright King seal to an unprecedented level. If these people were placed in the environment of Daluo heaven, they would definitely be first-class figures. But Xianyuan Wushuang, who could modify his cultivation method at the age of 10 and walk on his own martial Dao, was simply a monster. Xianyuan Wushuang glanced at Lu Sanjin and said faintly, "Lu Sanjin, I know you must be secretly sending a voice transmission to slander me, but it doesn't matter. The strong won't be angry because of the weak's slander and clamor, because that's all you have left." Lu Sanjin was a thick-skinned person. He almost fell out with Chu Xiu before, but after knowing Chu Xiu's real identity, he changed his face in the blink of an eye. But now, facing Xianyuan Wushuang, Lu Sanjin was so angry that his hands were trembling. Xianyuan Wushuang was not mocking him, but stating a fact. He really thought so, which was why Lu Sanjin was so angry. When encountering such a lunatic, even if you scolded him, you would not be able to defeat him. Xianyuan Wushuang. The martial arts exhibition will start in a few days. What are you doing here? Could it be that you want to have a fight before the martial arts exhibition? Xianyuan Wushuang glanced at Lu Sanjin and said lightly, "I'm not here for you." After saying that, he turned his eyes to Chu Xiu and said, "Are you the successor of Ancient Venerable who agreed to join the Imperial Sky Pavilion as a foreign elder?" Chu Xiu touched his nose and nodded. Chu Xiu might be able to guess the thoughts of others, but he really could not figure out Xianyuan Wushuang. Xianyuan Wushuang nodded and said, "Unfortunately, you made a wrong choice. The former pavilion master of the Imperial Sky Pavilion was a great figure, but he was already old. Heavenly King Li Wuxiang was not bad, but the Imperial Sky Pavilion had an earthly master, Zhong Qiushui. The two of them were fighting and there would be no peace. Looking at the younger generation, even a person like Lu Sanjin could become the East Domain Traveler, which showed that there was no one else in the Imperial Sky Pavilion. It was unwise for you to choose to join the Imperial Sky Pavilion at this time. But you are very lucky to have met me. Now, I'll give you a chance to join the High Heaven sect as a foreign elder. What the Imperial Sky Pavilion can give you, the High Heaven sect can also give you. What the Imperial Sky Pavilion can't give you, the High Heaven sect can still give you. Lu Sanjin did not expect that Xianyuan Wushuang would dare to expose the shortcomings of the Imperial Sky Pavilion in front of him. He shouted angrily, "Xianyuan Wushuang, what do you mean? Are you slandering the Imperial Sky Pavilion, or are you afraid that you will lose badly in the martial arts exhibition field? Nonsense. Do you really think there is no one else in the Imperial Sky Pavilion?" Xianyuan Wushuang still said in a very indifferent but extremely arrogant manner, "The outcome has been decided. Why would I be afraid of losing? I just want to win a little more beautiful too. During the martial arts exhibition field, there will be 3 rounds of 3 battles. I want to win all 3. If the successor of the ancient venerable meets the other disciples of the High Heaven sect, those good-for-nothings won't be able to stop him." Chu Xiu was shocked at this time. It was the first time he had seen a weirdo like Xianyuan Wushuang, who even scolded his own people when he went crazy. After he said this, the faces of the warriors of the High Heaven sect behind Xianyuan Wushuang darkened, even darker than Lu Sanjin's. Now, Chu Xiu also believed in Xianyuan Wushuang's strength in the High Heaven sect. If Xianyuan Wushuang acted like this and spoke without scruples, he would have been beaten to death long ago if he was not strong enough. Moreover, he had to be very strong to the point where he could ignore all kinds of schemes and plots. Otherwise, he would be easily killed by others. Chu Xiu wiped his nose and said, "I'm sorry, I have to keep my word. I, Chu Xiu, am a man of his word. Since I promised to join the Imperial Sky Pavilion as a foreign elder, I won't go back on my word." Xianyuan Wushuang shrugged and said, "Very well. There will always be people who keep making wrong choices in this world and never look back on the wrong path. It's not wrong for you to join the Imperial Sky Pavilion, but you made a mistake in meeting me, your opponent, when you joined the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Of course, you may regard me as your opponent, but my opponent will only be in the future." After saying this, Xianyuan Wushuang turned around and left with his people. For him, it was not worth making trouble for Chu Xiu before the martial arts exhibition field began. Moreover, he had never used any conspiracies since he was a child. In the face of anything, he would use his own strength to overcome it. This was his code of conduct. After Xianyuan Wushuang left, Yin Lingzi hesitated for a long time before saying, "I've heard that the character of this genius of the High Heaven sect, Xianyuan Wushuang, is somewhat indescribable. Now it seems that it is true." Lu Sanjin sneered and said, "Indescribable? He's a psychopath." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "There is a difference between a psychopath and a genius. As you said, this person is not easy to deal with. The fact that he was able to survive until now with the way he did things is the best proof." Lu Sanjin nodded gloomily. After the dishes were served, he asked Chu Xiu and Yin Lingzi to eat. His good mood was now completely ruined by Xianyuan Wushuang. However, Lu Sanjin's impression of Chu Xiu had improved a lot. People like Lu Sanjin seemed to be familiar with everyone and seemed to be friends with everyone, but in reality, that was probably because he was good at socializing. But in fact, there were only a few people who he could really treat as friends. Lu Sanjin had treated Chu Xiu the same way before. As the Eastern Territory partner, it was normal for him to try to rope in a prime venerable successor in his territory. But this time, Chu Xiu refused the recruitment of the High Heaven sect, which made him feel grateful. Because Xianyuan Wushuang was right. The Emperor's Sky Pavilion and the High Heaven sect had been fighting against each other for so many years, but the Emperor's Sky Pavilion had always been at a disadvantage. And now, it happened to be the time when the Emperor's Sky Pavilion was at a disadvantage. If the Emperor's Sky Pavilion had the upper hand, Lu Sanjin would not have been reprimanded and banned from participating in the martial arts exhibition last time when he had crippled someone. The Emperor's Sky Pavilion could have explained it by saying that weapons had no eyes and fists had no heart, and they might have even rewarded Lu Sanjin afterwards. However, he was not as strong as Xianyuan Wushuang and gave him a reason to cause trouble, so he could only keep a low profile for the time being. 3 days later, the martial arts exhibition between the High Heaven sect and the Emperor's Sky Pavilion was held as scheduled. At the very center of High Heaven City was a huge terrace that was thousands of meters long and wide. Countless spirit arrays were set up on it, and statues stood at each of the 4 corners. It was said that these were statues of the 4 ancestral masters who had made the greatest contributions to the High Heaven sect. This was the place where the High Heaven sect held the martial arts exhibition, but at other times, it was also used by the High Heaven sect's masters to give lectures. In the past, the martial arts exhibition between the 2 sects was used to settle personal grievances, but later on, it had become a conventional rule. There were even many foreign cultivators who came to watch the ceremony. The people of the High Heaven sect and the Emperor's Sky Pavilion were on the north and south sides, while the east and west sides were reserved for the spectators. Sitting among the Emperor's Sky Pavilion's crowd, Chu Xiu looked around. At this time, Lu Sanjin came over and said, "Brother Chu, there will be a martial immortal master from the High Heaven sect coming to give a lecture. You probably haven't heard of him, so listen carefully. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated." Chu Xiu's eyes lit up when he heard this. Chapter 1109. Chu Xiu had various speculations and conjectures about the martial immortal realm. In the lower realm, Chu Xiu was certain that there should be 4 people who had reached the martial immortal realm: Duge Weiwei, Ning Xuanji, Zhong Shenxiu, and Jun Wushan. Moreover, Chu Xiu even suspected that Duge Weiwei and Ning Xuanji were top existences even among martial immortals. However, Chu Xiu did not know whether the martial immortal realm was divided into several small realms. There were no records about this in the ancient books he had searched in Fanglin County, including the records of the Wind Smell Pavilion. For fear of being suspected, Chu Xiu did not ask Lu Sanjin and Yin Lingzi. Both of them should know. If he could see a real martial immortal now, Chu Xiu would be able to roughly infer the level of existence in this realm. The whole place was bustling for a while, and after a while, it suddenly quieted down. A large number of High Heaven sect disciples in white came out, led by an old man and a middle-aged man in silver-white Qilin radiant armor. Lu Sanjin introduced, "The old man is the previous sect master of High Heaven sect, Qin Baiyuan, and the one in the armor is the current number 1 general of High Heaven sect, the battle god monarch, Immortal Linghu, who is responsible for guarding High Heaven sect. This is not an ordinary person. High Heaven sect is the most important cultivation paradise in High Heaven sect, and High Heaven sect also contains all the historical books and other precious items of High Heaven sect. It can even be said that High Heaven sect's sect master can die in battle, but Immortal Linghu is the last barrier guarding High Heaven sect. If he dies, High Heaven sect will be destroyed." Chu Xiu touched his chin. He did not ask much, but he had roughly estimated the strength of High Heaven sect and Imperial Sky Pavilion. There were 2 martial immortals in Imperial Sky Pavilion, the previous pavilion master and the current pavilion master, Li Wuxiang. On the other hand, High Heaven sect was able to suppress the Royal Sky Pavilion. They had already sent out 2 martial immortals, and their sect master had yet to come out. Furthermore, after seeing the 2 people before him, Chu Xiu was finally certain that the 4 people he had guessed were all martial immortal level existences. At least from the aura that Chu Xiu sensed, Zhong Shenxiu's strength was absolutely stronger than the 2 present. It was simply unfathomable. Jun Wushan's strength was also much stronger than the old Qin Baiyuan. In terms of pure aura, he was almost on par with Linghu Xianshan. Of course, This was only Chu Xiu's judgment based on his own senses. There would be a lot of mistakes. If they really fought, it was still unknown who was stronger between Linghu Immortal Mountain and Jun Wushan. But thinking about it this way was a little scary. Previously, Chu Xiu had thought that the difference in strength between the lower realm and the Daluotian was that the Daluotian were stronger. This had nothing to do with the person, but the environment. But now, he realized that the waters of the lower realm were deeper than Chu Xiu had imagined. If one could step into the martial immortal realm in a place like the lower realm, how strong would he be after coming to the Daluotian? At this time, after the people of High Heaven sect exchanged a few words, the sermon was about to begin. This time, the person giving the sermon was Qin Baiyuan. In fact, most of the Daluotian cultivators who gave sermons were powerful and prestigious older cultivators like Qin Baiyuan. In terms of combat power, they might not be as strong as Linghu Immortal Mountain, who was in his prime, but in terms of comprehension of the martial Dao, they were undoubtedly stronger than the other party. Qin Baiyuan walked to the center of the terrace, sat cross-legged on the ground, and said, "The way of martial Dao is to reach the heavens and enter the earth. It is to cultivate oneself and comprehend the heavens and earth." In the past sermons, some things have been said too many times. This old man wants to say something new this time. Looking around, Qin Baiyuan said in a deep voice, "Today, what I want to talk about is the way of fighting." As soon as these words came out, everyone present showed a look of interest. Many people knew that High Heaven sect's combat power was very strong. Therefore, the way of fighting explained by the masters of High Heaven sect aroused their interest even more. Fighters fight against each other and dance with weapons in hand. When martial artists fight and kill, their control over their martial skills and the changes in their mental state are all extremely important. Qin Baiyuan was obviously very proficient in teaching this kind of thing, so he spoke with confidence and assurance on the terrace. The others also listened with great interest, but after listening for a while, Chu Xiu shook his head gently. It was not that Chu Xiu was arrogant and could not even bear to listen to the sermon of a martial immortal, but rather that what Qin Baiyuan said was of no use to Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu's strength was obtained from slaughtering his way through bloody storms. If it was the Tao of battle, then he wasn't inferior to others. The only difference was that he could fight, but he couldn't speak with confidence and composure like Qin Baiyuan. Moreover, he also found that it was no wonder the Daluotian cultivators were so keen on teaching. In fact, they did not have any real goods to offer. It was like someone telling you that you could succeed as long as you worked hard, and then casually giving you a few examples. However, when you tried to do it, you would find that the key was not whether you worked hard or not, but how you should work hard. This kind of sermon would not reveal the secrets of the sect, and it could also gain fame, so why not? Of course, it did not exclude the possibility that some masters might really have some real goods to offer. Qin Baiyuan spoke for a full hour. When he was done, he looked at the Imperial Sky Pavilion side and said calmly, "Vice Pavilion Master, I've said what I wanted to say. Let's not waste any more time. Who's going to go first in the martial arts competition?" Zhong Qiushui waved his hand, and a tall cultivator with a slightly arrogant expression walked to the center of the arena. Chu Xiu suddenly realized that the disciples of the Daluotian sects did not seem to be small, but there were not many who were as modest and polite as Yin Lingzi. This was also related to the environment of the Daluotian. The territory was vast, and most of the cultivators who traveled the Jianghu were actually in their own territory. There were too few incidents and dangers, and no matter where they went, there would be people who would treat them well. It was not strange for them to develop such a temperament. In the lower world, the geniuses on the dragon and tiger list like Chu Xiu had been fighting with all kinds of people since they were young. They had experienced the struggle between cultivators and Buddhists, the struggle between righteous and demonic, and the intrigue between aristocratic families. Everyone knew that there was always someone better out there, so they could not be arrogant even if they wanted to. High Heaven sect also waved their hands and someone immediately came down to fight. Chu Xiu glanced at the two people fighting and felt that they were not very interesting. Most cultivators in the same realm as the Daluotian were actually weaker than those from the lower world in a real battle. With the strength of these two people, forget Chu Xiu, Even cultivators who had just entered the true fire soul refining realm like Chu Wuji or Lu Fengxian could easily deal with them. Of course, the only thing shocking about them was their age. The two fought for less than a quarter of an hour before the cultivator from the Royal Sky Pavilion was defeated. The martial Dao of the High Heaven sect was very similar to that of the Royal Sky Pavilion. They were both the type that was fierce and imposing to the extreme. Therefore, when the two sides fought, they mainly competed in terms of strength. In the second round, Zhong Qiushui waved his hand and the person who came up was Huang Ju, who had been punched by Chu Xiu and vomited blood. Although this guy had been punched by Chu Xiu before, there were still many precious medicinal pills in the Royal Sky Pavilion. He had recovered in a few days. Seeing Huang Ju come up, Xianyuan Wushuang from the High Heaven sect was stunned. Previously, Xianyuan Wushuang thought that the Royal Sky Pavilion would let the strongest person defeat the weakest person on their side and then use a piece of trash to fight with him. Who would have thought that they would leave the successor of the ancient venerable to him? Had they given up on treating him, or had they overestimated the so-called successor of the ancient venerable? Xianyuan Wushuang chuckled and did not think about it anymore. Anyway, in his opinion, as long as he went up, the result was destined. There was nothing to worry about. At this time, Huang Ju had already fought with the warriors of the High Heaven sect. It was no wonder that Lu Sanjin had warned Chu Xiu about how troublesome Huang Ju was. Although Huang Ju's foundation was far inferior to Chu Xiu's, his battle prowess was not weak. He had directly suppressed Chu Xiu and defeated him in 15 minutes. With one win and one loss, Xianyuan Wushuang snorted and said, "Trash." According to his original plan, although it was the best of three, the rule was that he had to fight in all 3 rounds. Therefore, he had to win all 3 rounds. He did not expect that before he met Chu Xiu, his side had already lost one. The defeated disciple of the High Heaven sect was angry, but he did not dare to say anything. In the stands, Qin Baiyuan frowned and said, "Wushuang needs to change his character. He needs to treat his own people more gently. Why does he have to act like an enemy? If he continues like this, how can he convince the public if the High Heaven sect is handed over to him in the future?" Linghu Xianshan said lightly, "Since he can't be the sect master of the High Heaven sect, he can follow me and be the gatekeeper. Isn't it better to guard the High Heaven sect and not have to deal with those intrigues?" Qin Baiyuan smiled bitterly. Although the gatekeeper of the High Heaven sect was equally important, the sect master who commanded the entire High Heaven sect was undoubtedly the most important. When the third round began, Xianyuan Wushuang stepped onto the high platform, which immediately caused a burst of discussion. Not to mention the entire East Territory, even in the entire Daluotian, Xianyuan Wushuang had a great reputation. Of course, there was a mixture of praise and criticism. When Chu Xiu also stepped onto the platform, everyone was stunned. Who was he? Was he a new disciple of the Imperial Sky Pavilion? When the identity of Chu Xiu was announced, everyone realized that he was the successor of Gu Zun. Since the incident in Cold River City, it was not uncommon for foreign elders to represent their own disciples. Therefore, it was normal for Chu Xiu to represent the Imperial Sky Pavilion in the competition. However, everyone was also wondering about Chu Xiu's identity. Which successor of Gu Zun was he? In ancient times, there were not many Gu Zun who cultivated in seclusion in the mountains and forests, but there were still quite a few of them. Moreover, they would send their disciples into the Jianghu every few days. Therefore, those big sects knew the names of most of the Gu Zun. However, it was strange that the Imperial Sky Pavilion did not announce Chu Xiu's successor. Chapter 11:10. Although the Imperial Sky Pavilion did not explain the inheritance of Chu Xiu, since they had sent such a successor of the ancient venerables, his strength should not be weak. To be precise, every successor of the ancient venerables who stepped into the Jianghu was not weak. Of course, this was only for ordinary warriors. For a big sect like the High Heaven sect, whatever the successors of the ancient venerables had, they also had, and whatever the successors of the ancient venerables did not have. In such an environment, the disciples taught by the High Heaven sect would not be weaker than the successors of the ancient venerables. Xianyuan Wushuang stepped onto the terrace, looked at Chu Xiu, shook his head, and said, "It's a pity that you finally made such a wrong decision. But you're also lucky, because you can't use too much force in the martial arts practice." Lu Sanjing, that idiot, couldn't control his anger and used too much force. As a result, he was reprimanded and punished. Why bother? It's not a glorious thing to show off your power to the weak. Don't worry, it will be solved soon. When the others heard Xianyuan Wushuang's words, they all had different expressions on their faces. Although they had long heard that this genius disciple of the High Heaven sect was a little strange, they had never expected him to be so strange. Chu Xiu also frowned. He was not so easily provoked, but facing a guy like Xianyuan Wushuang at this time, his patience was almost at its limit. The moment Chu Xiu unsheathed the formation-breaking saber in his hand, the surrounding essence of heaven and earth was turned into the extreme Yin force along with the saber's sharpness. Perhaps it had something to do with the rich essence of heaven and earth in the Daluotian, but Chu Xiu also found that his formation-breaking saber had changed after coming to the Daluotian, and the essence of heaven and earth seemed to be stronger. Lu Sanjin, who was in the spectator stands, raised his eyebrows. Indeed, Chu Xiu was most proficient in saber techniques. Xianyuan Wushuang showed a confident smile and said, "Your saber is good." As his voice fell, Xianyuan Wushuang took a step forward, and a dazzling gang qi burst out from his body. Almost in the blink of an eye, Xianyuan Wushuang absorbed almost all the essence of the world within a radius of 1,000 feet. All of it was under his control, making Xianyuan Wushuang as dazzling as the sun. Everyone at the scene was shocked as they discussed among themselves. Xianyuan Wushuang was born without meridians and should have been a waste. In the end, he relied on this kind of aptitude to forcefully create a cultivation method that was most suitable for him. At this moment, when he attacked, his strength and foundation were simply terrifying. Even some of the experts in the profound enlightenment realm could not guarantee that they could control more heaven and earth energy than Xianyuan Wushuang. The difference between a peerless genius and a lunatic trash resulted in Xianyuan Wushuang. Like a blazing sun falling from the sky, a powerful force directly crushed towards Chu Xiu. When dealing with most people, Xianyuan Wushuang did not bother to waste so much energy and directly used the simplest means to crush them. However, this time he was facing Chu Xiu, the successor of the ancient master, so he used a little more strength. Narrowing his eyes, Chu Xiu chopped down with the formation-breaking saber in his hand. In an instant, the sharp light was dazzling. Time seemed to have stopped in an instant. Chu Xiu's saber traveled through time and space, and the people present did not even blink. But the next moment, Chu Xiu's saber had already appeared in front of Xianyuan Wushuang. Under this saber, everything could be broken. The sharpness of saber principle was exerted to the extreme by Chu Xiu's saber. With the formation-breaking saber as the center, everything in the world seemed to be divided into two halves. The powerful gang qi was neatly torn, and the blazing sun was divided. Xianyuan Wushuang's eyes were full of shock and disbelief. He had never expected that the guy in front of him was so strong, so strong. In a hurry, he shouted and pinched the incantation with his hands. The silver gang qi turned into talismans and condensed into the shadow of a divine gate in midair. High Sky Southern Gate. The power of the divine gate was solid and heavy, reaching the sky and the earth. But the saber move made by Chu Xiu could be said to be the extreme of his saber principle. This saber move perfectly combined the red dust cut with the saber essence of the breaking formula. How could it be so easy to resist? With a violent explosion, the whole terrace shook. The formation pattern on it shone with a golden light and blocked the impact of this force. When the storm of gang qi dissipated, the people found that Chu Xiu was still standing there, while Xianyuan Wushuang was directly sent flying by Chu Xiu's saber move. Seeing this scene, the people present suddenly burst into an uproar, their eyes full of disbelief. Although they were all speechless about Xianyuan Wushuang's character, Xianyuan Wushuang's strength was well known throughout the East Domain, even the whole Daluotian. But as soon as they started fighting, he was sent flying by Chu Xiu's saber move. What kind of monster was Chu Xiu? Lu Sanjin's mouth opened wide, and then he glanced at Huang Ju. At this time, Huang Ju's face was a little pale, and he even secretly rejoiced. Fortunately, when Chu Xiu fought with him last time, he used his fists instead of his saber. Otherwise, even the 9 Revolutions divine pill would not be able to save him. At the top of the High Heaven Sect's stand, Qin Baiyuan frowned and said, "Where did this little guy come from? How can he be so strong? Why do I feel that his saber move is so familiar? I seem to have seen it in an ancient book." Linghu Xianshan waved his hand and asked someone to find detailed information about Chu Xiu. He said indifferently, "It's normal for him to be the successor of Gu Zun. Those guys have been cooped up in the mountains and forests for so many years and paid such a high price. There are always people who are lucky enough to find and cultivate a few outstanding people. Meng Xinghe is one of them." As they spoke, someone brought over Chu Xiu's information. It was extremely detailed. After reading it, Linghu Xianshan shook his head and said, "He is the successor of Gu Zun and has been recognized by Spiritual Treasure Temple and Imperial Sky Pavilion. It seems that his background is not small. However, after being defeated, he won't reveal his name until he gets revenge. Who is this hypocritical guy? Although those Gu Zun have always been very hypocritical, it's really rare to see someone this hypocritical." Since he was recognized by Spiritual Treasure Temple and Imperial Sky Pavilion, Qin Baiyuan and Linghu Xianshan had no doubt about Chu Xiu's identity. Putting Imperial Sky Pavilion aside, Spiritual Treasure Temple had a good reputation among the many Daluotian forces. With Yin Lingzi's confirmation, nobody would suspect that Chu Xiu was a fake. Looking at the ring, Qin Baiyuan said with a frown, "However, this little guy's strength is so terrifying. The outcome of this battle is still unknown." Linghu Xianshan said indifferently, "It's no big deal if you lose. It's okay to lose for a while, but don't lose for the rest of your life." Qin Baiyuan sighed and said, "I'm afraid that Wushuang will take things too hard and suffer a blow to his mental state." Linghu Xianshan's mouth twitched as he said, "So what if his mental state is suffering a blow to his mental state? Even if his character changes greatly, can it be worse than it is now?" Qin Baiyuan was stunned. Then he smiled bitterly. It was true. Xinyuan Wushuang's character was already so bad. Even if he changed again, how much worse could it be? In the ring, Xinyuan Wushuang climbed up from the smoke and dust. His eyes were filled with anger and disbelief. He was furious that he had actually suffered a loss at Chu Xiu's hands, and he did not dare to believe that the fellow before him was actually so powerful. "Good. Very good. Very good. You've successfully irritated me. I didn't intend to use my full strength to avoid hurting you by accident and being punished like that idiot Lu Sanjin. But now that you've successfully irritated me..." Before Xinyuan Wushuang finished his words, Chu Xiu moved and chopped down again with his saber. It was still the combination of ethereal cut and breaking formula. The powerful saber intent that seemed to be able to break the world immediately made Xinyuan Wushuang swallow the rest of his words. This guy's mouth was so annoying that Chu Xiu did not want to listen to him anymore. Xinyuan Wushuang looked solemn. As he waved his hands, the powerful essence of the world was completely controlled by him. On both sides, the essence of the world was held in his hands like 2 huge dragons. They intertwined with each other and roared, tearing at Chu Xiu. The saber intent of the breaking formula tore everything in front of him, but the 2 huge dragons of essence overlapped with each other, and the spiral qi kept wearing down the power of Chu Xiu's saber. At this time, Xinyuan Wushuang took out his weapon from the space secret box. It was an extremely gorgeous halberd. A golden dragon coiled around the body of the halberd, and the crescent blade shone with a dazzling light. This High Heaven Dragon halberd was specially made for Xinyuan Wushuang by High Heaven Sect with countless rare materials and an ancient venerable who was good at forging and refining weapons. When Xinyuan Wushuang became the #1 among the younger generation of High Heaven Sect, there were only a few warriors in the entire High Heaven Sect who could receive such treatment. Holding the High Heaven Dragon halberd, Xinyuan Wushuang was surrounded by silver gang qi. He looked like an ancient demon god, with golden and silver light intertwining. When the halberd smashed down, it collided with Chu Xiu's breaking formation. Suddenly, a stronger power fluctuation broke out. Even the ground under their feet, which could withstand the pressure of experts in the metaphysic realm, could not bear this power and began to crack. Chu Xiu's physical strength and Gangqi power had reached the extreme of the same realm. Although Xianyuan Wushuang's physical strength was slightly inferior to Chu Xiu's, he was born without meridians. The Gangqi power had penetrated into his flesh and bones, and his Gangqi power was even more majestic than Chu Xiu's. For a moment, the two were in a deadlock. Xianyuan Wushuang said coldly, "I told you, it's you who forced me to use my full strength." Before he finished his words, an extremely cold force of extreme yin broke out and wrapped Xianyuan Wushuang in it. The next moment, the world-extinguishing fire burned fiercely and wrapped Xianyuan Wushuang in it. Holding the saber in his right hand, Chu Xiu slammed his left palm down. The majestic demon Qi gathered and turned into a huge palm print of dozens of meters, directly blasting Xianyuan Wushuang away. Heavenly Demon Palm. Chapter 11:11. Chu Xiu had found many martial arts techniques in the things left by Dugu Weiwei. Unfortunately, they were not killing moves like the mortal world ethereal cut. They were all martial arts techniques used by Dugu Weiwei before he dominated the whole Jianghu. Chu Xiu did not learn these martial arts techniques seriously, but he knew a little about them. Maybe he could use them in the future, like the heavenly demonic palm. However, what shocked people was not Chu Xiu's heavenly demonic palm, but the world-annihilating fire. In the human world, no one recognized the world-annihilating fire. After Chu Xiu used it, it had become one of Chu Xiu's symbols. But in the Daluotian world, the world-annihilating fire was a secret cultivation method of the Mahakala palace of the Sanskrit sect in the western region, which was mysterious and unpredictable. The Sanskrit sect never accepted outer disciples, and Chu Xiu did not seem to be a monk. How could he use the world-annihilating fire? Linghu Xianshan said faintly, "According to the information just now, the inheritance of Chu Xiu's lineage can be traced back to before the Great Ancient Tribulation. Maybe the cultivation method of the Sanskrit sect was leaked at that time. In that period it was normal." Qin Baiyuan also nodded. This kind of thing was not rare. Before the Great Ancient Tribulation, the whole world had been in a mess. In order to compete for the places to enter the Daluotian world, various sects were even fighting against each other. In that period, not to mention the cultivation method being leaked, as long as it could save one's life, they could leave anything behind. However, in the field, Chu Xiu's sudden move caught Xianyuan Wushuang by surprise. Xianyuan Wushuang had always thought that Chu Xiu's martial arts was the same as his, which was fierce and imposing. Who would have thought that Chu Xiu would turn around and use the extremely evil world-annihilating fire? The destructive fire burned his Gangqi and primordial spirit, which immediately made Xianyuan Wushuang embarrassed. As a result, he was sent flying by Chu Xiu's slap. His anger had risen to the extreme. Previously, he was still saying that those who couldn't control their anger were weaklings, but now, it was his turn to be the one who couldn't control his anger. This time, Xianyuan Wushuang did not say anything. He held the high heaven dragon subduing halberd tightly with both hands. Strange patterns loomed all over his body, and the force of heaven and earth crazily poured into his body. If it were an ordinary person, this would simply be a self-explosion, but Xianyuan Wushuang forcibly absorbed all the essence of heaven and earth into his body. Feeling that power, Chu Xiu's expression changed slightly. Pure devil qi appeared in his hand, and he shot out 3 city-destroying arrows in succession, trying to stop Xianyuan Wushuang from absorbing the essence qi of heaven and earth. However, the strange patterns in front of Xianyuan Wushuang blocked the arrows before they fell, using the purest primordial qi to purify the force of nirvana on the 3 city-destroying arrows. The next moment, Xianyuan Wushuang was surrounded by the dazzling golden primordial qi. He made a gesture and shouted, "Please enter my body with the fighting soul." In an instant, some kind of power seemed to be triggered. The next moment, the devil qi in the air crazily poured into Xianyuan Wushuang's body. Behind him, a hazy phantom of hundreds of meters high appeared, wearing black dragon armor and holding halberd. Its devil flame was monstrous, and its power was extremely terrifying. A hint of surprise appeared in the eyes of the others. Xinyuan Wushuang had actually gone all out. To be precise, what Xinyuan Wushuang used was beyond the scope of martial skills. It was a secret skill obtained by the High Heaven sect in the past. It could use something inherited from the primordial demon god to guide the demon god's brand into one's body in exchange for great power. This secret skill originated from some extinct ancient barbarian tribes. The High Heaven sect modified it by using the personal items left by the experts in the past to arouse the will imprinted in heaven and earth. It was called Fighting Soul Technique. When one reached the peak of the martial immortal realm, he was truly a powerful existence comparable to heaven and earth. Since the power of Dugu Weiwei 500 years ago could be imprinted in the void, other legendary experts could naturally do the same. However, the premise was that the power of the imprint left by the experts at this level would cause a strong backlash after entering one's body, even if it was activated by the personal items. Therefore, after the Fighting Soul Technique was developed, it was basically shelved. In the history of the High Heaven sect, no more than 3 people could successfully cultivate it. Xinyuan Wushuang was so talented that he directly nourished the fighting soul into his body with the powerful world Yuan Qi. Everyone else was shocked. Only Chu Xiu had a strange expression on his face. He recognized the fighting soul that Xinyuan Wushuang had attracted. The primordial demon god, Marquis Lu Wenhou. As a fierce and powerful great demon god in the past, Marquis Lu Wenhou, who could be besieged by all the martial artists in the world. What he had done could even be compared with Dugu Weiwei. Of course, he was qualified to be attracted as a fighting soul. But now, the inheritance of Marquis Lu Wenhou was with him, Chu Xiu. In the past, after Lu Fengxian obtained the inheritance of Marquis Lu Wenhou, she had given Chu Xiu Marquis Lu Wenhou's body refining cultivation method, 9 Heavens Devil Golden Body. Chu Xiu had also cultivated this cultivation method to the profound realm. Now, Xinyuan Wushuang had attracted Marquis Lu Wenhou's fighting soul to fight with him. Who was the fake one? The silver gang qi around Xinyuan Wushuang had disappeared and was replaced by the deep devil qi. He stared at Chu Xiu and said coldly, "Good, very good. In the East region, no one has been able to force me to this point for many years. You should feel honored." Really? Chu Xiu put away the broken formation and walked forward step by step. With every step, the devil qi around him became stronger. In the end, Chu Xiu's surroundings were already filled with demonic flames, roasting his powerful physical body. Waves of trembling energy burst out from his body. Some experts with good eyesight had noticed that the aura exuded by Chu Xiu was exactly the same as that of Xinyuan Wushuang after the fighting soul had been attracted into his body. No, to be precise, the devil qi around him was even purer than that of Xinyuan Wushuang. After all, the devil qi around Xinyuan Wushuang was just some devil qi that was automatically absorbed from the surrounding heaven and earth after the Marquis Lu Wenhou's fighting soul was drawn into his body. The devil qi around Chu Xiu was formed after he cultivated the 9 Heavens Devil Golden Body to the profound realm. Xinyuan Wushuang naturally felt this aura, and even the fighting soul in his body began to become unstable. He was stunned and did not know what was going on. But at this time, Chu Xiu had already rushed over and punched. The devil flame around him was monstrous, and the fist intent seemed to tear everything apart. Xinyuan Wushuang lifted halberd and was about to fight, but the shadow of Marquis Lu Wenhou behind him was constantly trembling. Not only did it not exert the power of the fighting soul technique, but it even dragged him down, making his movements extremely slow. He needed to spend a large part of his energy to suppress the restless fighting soul in his body, so he was directly blown away by Chu Xiu's punch. Chu Xiu's figure did not stop moving. He was also very good at close-range combat. After a series of attacks, Xinyuan Wushuang was basically beaten up and had no power to fight back. In fact, his performance was not as good as before. In fact, Xinyuan Wushuang was also unlucky. He came from the High Heaven sect and had many trump cards, not just the fighting soul technique. If he had fought with Chu Xiu honestly, even if he was defeated in the end, he would not be so embarrassed. But he was unlucky enough to use the fighting soul technique, and it happened to trigger the imprint of Marquis Lu Wenho, so he could not blame Chu Xiu for being ruthless. Marquis Lu Wenho had died long ago, and the last bit of his true spirit had been absorbed by Lu Fengxian. Therefore, the imprint he left was just an instinct. Since it could be affected by his personal item and guided here, it would naturally be affected by his old cultivation method, and even more so. After being suppressed to the extreme by Chu Xiu, Xinyuan Wushuang's eyes almost popped out of their sockets, as if he had gone crazy. As Qin Baiyuan had worried before, Xinyuan Wushuang had never lost before. If he lost this time, it would definitely have an impact on his state of mind. Now, Xinyuan Wushuang was not completely defeated, but he was suppressed to such an extent in front of so many people, which had gradually blurred his mind. The next moment, Xinyuan Wushuang blocked Chu Xiu's punch with halberd. He made a seal with his hands, and in an instant, his aura suddenly contracted. The next moment, the shadow of Marquis Lu Wenho behind him began to explode. It was not exploding, but a powerful explosion caused by his aura. Chu Xiu's face suddenly changed. What a lunatic! Xinyuan Wushuang was not only mentally ill, but also a lunatic. Seeing that he could not control the fighting soul, he directly detonated it in his body. Just now, Xinyuan Wushuang had guided the powerful essence of heaven and earth into his body, which shocked even Chu Xiu. He had absorbed this power into his body, and then detonated it together with the fighting soul. What did he want to do? Did he want to die together with Chu Xiu? Last time in the martial arts competition, Lu Sanjin had been punished because he had severely injured his opponent. This time, Xinyuan Wushuang directly turned the martial arts competition into a life-and-death fight. Xinyuan Wushuang wanted to fight to the death, but Chu Xiu did not want to die with him. The next moment, Chu Xiu suddenly began to retreat, and Xinyuan Wushuang followed him with a grim smile. However, as Chu Xiu retreated, he made a seal with his hands. In an instant, countless cold auras gathered around Chu Xiu. Pure demon qi lingered around him, and the cries of ghosts and deities descended from the void. The sky was crying blood rain, and the void was directly torn apart. The demon god's shadow looked down indifferently and reached out a hand to grab Xinyuan Wushuang, trying to pull him into the boundless gloomy world. At this moment, the warriors of High Heaven sect on the platform finally could not sit still. Qin Baiyuan took a step forward and arrived on the balcony. With a tap of his hand, the soaring firmament southern heavenly gate appeared and sealed Chu Xiu's demon wailing heaven great compassion mantra, causing the demon god's shadow to be completely destroyed. The next moment he pointed at Xinyuan Wushuang several times, making him groan and faint, but also calmed the power that was about to explode in his body. Qin Baiyuan looked at Chu Xiu and said coldly, condensing the natural evil demon qi in the world to the extreme, what a vicious cultivation method. Didn't the Imperial Sky Pavilion tell you that you don't need to kill your opponent in the martial arts competition? Chapter 11-12. Xinyuan Wushuang could lose, but he couldn't die. After all, he was the most outstanding disciple of this generation of High Heaven sect. In terms of martial Dao talent and cultivation, Xinyuan Wushuang was unparalleled even in the entire history of High Heaven sect. Therefore, even though there was a rule that the older generation warriors were not allowed to participate in the martial arts exhibition, the disciples of High Heaven sect were all crippled by Lu Sanjin in the last martial arts exhibition, but High Heaven sect did not participate in it. However, this time, Qin Baiyuan really could not bear it, because this person was Xinyuan Wushuang. Chu Xiu said lightly, "Senior of High Heaven sect, you have to be reasonable when you speak and do things. With so many eyes watching, it's not that I want to kill him, but that someone is crazy and wants to drag me down with him. He wants to die, but I don't. Do I need to say who killed him first?" Qin Baiyuan stared at Chu Xiu for a long time, then finally snorted coldly and said, "My High Heaven sect lost this time's competition." Although High Heaven sect's methods were overbearing, they were not unreasonable. In front of so many people, a loss was a loss, and their High Heaven sect could afford to lose. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and was about to leave when he suddenly felt that someone was staring at him meaningfully. But when Chu Xiu looked back, he found that everyone was looking at him. It was understandable that Chu Xiu could defeat Xinyuan Wushuang. After all, although Xinyuan Wushuang was strong, no one said that he was the top expert of the younger generation of Daluotian. But Chu Xiu's combat strength was amazing. Even among the descendants of prime venerables who had appeared in recent years, few could compete with him, so it was normal that he was the focus of everyone's attention at this time. Chu Xiu frowned slightly. He could sense that the gaze from before was very different from the gazes of the others. It was obvious that there was something strange about it. However, there were too many people present, so Chu Xiu couldn't distinguish it. He could only secretly raise his guard. Lu Sanjin came over excitedly and pulled Chu Xiu along. He laughed and said, "Ha! Brother Chu's strength is really extraordinary." Xinyuan Wushuang was unable to fight back. Unfortunately, that guy actually fainted. Otherwise, I would really like to see his expression. Speaking of which, I'm really lucky to be able to meet you, Brother Chu. Lu Sanjin really thought that he was very lucky. If he did not happen to be near Fanglin County, the Emperor Sky Pavilion would not have sent him to handle this matter. If it wasn't for Yin Lingzi's timely appearance, he would have definitely fallen out with Chu Xiu. Perhaps, they would have already started fighting. After all, this guy's behavior at the beginning was indeed suspicious. If he had not been thick-skinned enough to convince Chu Xiu to join the Imperial Sky Pavilion as their guest, he would not be where he was today. With so many coincidences put together, Lu Sanjin could be said to be extremely lucky. Chu Xiu smiled faintly and said, "It's just luck." He wasn't being humble. He was really lucky. Xinyuan Wushuang's strength was not that weak, and the battle soul technique was not his only trump card. However, he was so unlucky that he chose to use the battle soul technique and attracted the mark left by Marquis Lu Wenhou, which was simply a chance for Chu Xiu. Otherwise, Chu Xiu would not have won so easily, even though he was confident that he would not be defeated if he had fought in a different way. What happened next was simple. The High Heaven sect lost in this martial arts competition. Not only did they lose some natural treasures, but they also lost some conditions to the Imperial Sky Pavilion. As for what these conditions were, it was up to Zhong Qiushui and the others to negotiate. Even Lu Sanjin was not qualified to listen, let alone Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu stayed with the Imperial Sky Pavilion in High Heaven City for a few more days. When everything was settled, he followed Lu Sanjin and the others back to the headquarters of the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Yin Lingzi said goodbye to them and continued to travel around the Daluotian continent. Like the High Heaven sect, the Imperial Sky Pavilion had a giant city of its own. This seemed to be the habit of these sects when they first came to the Daluotian continent. At that time, the Daluotian continent had not been exploited, so there were fierce beasts everywhere. Building such a giant city could also protect some young cultivators. Compared with High Heaven City, the giant city where the headquarters of the Imperial Sky Pavilion was located was much more ordinary, but only in comparison to High Heaven City. In fact, the Imperial Sky Pavilion was built on the top of a mountain that was thousands of meters high, and there was only a nearly vertical mountain road leading to the top. The giant city on the top of the mountain was also very eye-catching, and it could even be seen from dozens of kilometers away. When Chu Xiu and others arrived at the gate of the Imperial Sky Pavilion, someone was already waiting to greet them. It was the pavilion master of the Imperial Sky Pavilion, Heavenly King Li Wuxiang. Li Wuxiang was worthy of his title. He was tall and mighty, and his face was dignified and solemn. Just by looking at him, he gave off a very dignified feeling. When Li Wuxiang saw that Lu Sanjin and the others had returned, a smile appeared on his face. He said, "Very good. You guys did pretty well this time. Our Imperial Sky Pavilion has lost 3 consecutive martial arts demonstrations. We finally won this round." Although Lu Sanjin had performed well in the last martial arts demonstration, the other 2 disciples of the Imperial Sky Pavilion did not perform well. The previous 2 times were even worse. At that time, Lu Sanjin had not yet risen, and the Imperial Sky Pavilion was almost beaten by High Heaven sect. Zhong Qiushui just walked over and said lightly, "Pavilion Master, the conditions of High Heaven sect have been discussed. They are quite efficient and did not shirk their responsibilities." Li Wuxiang nodded and said, "That's good." Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes. The relationship between the Pavilion Master and Deputy Pavilion Master was very delicate. It was said that Li Wuxiang and Zhong Qiushui had a very good relationship before. They were the two heroes of the Imperial Sky Pavilion, and they were like brothers. In the end, a dispute over the position of Pavilion Master had escalated to this point. Of course, Chu Xiu was just watching the show and did not plan to delve too deeply into it. At this time, Li Wuxiang also looked at Chu Xiu and said with a smile, "You must be Chu, right?" Chu represented my Imperial Sky Pavilion in winning the martial arts demonstration this time and can be said to be the greatest contributor to my Imperial Sky Pavilion. At the banquet, my Imperial Sky Pavilion will also reward you handsomely. Li Wuxiang's attitude was very good. He was courteous but did not lose his dignity, but Chu Xiu could see a bit of inquisitiveness in his eyes. This was all normal, so Chu Xiu did not care. He just cupped his fists and said, "Since I have become an honored guest of Imperial Sky Pavilion, it is natural for me to take the money and work hard." Li Wuxiang gave Chu Xiu a few more words of encouragement before going off to greet the others. The banquet in the evening was actually just that. Although it was nominally a welcoming dinner for Lu Sanjin and the others, the atmosphere was very awkward. Zhong Qiushui, the Deputy Pavilion Master, was in charge of leading the team to participate in the martial arts demonstration, but his attitude was very cold. Moreover, Zhong Qiushui was not without a foundation in the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Although he had a cold personality, he treated his own people very well. He was very generous, and when he gave pointers to his subordinates or disciples, he never hid anything. So even though he wasn't the Pavilion Master, there were many people who were willing to follow him. These people and Li Wuxiang, the Pavilion Master's people, were on opposite sides. The entire scene was as awkward as one could imagine. Chu Xiu did not mind. He was only concerned about the promise Lu Sanjin made to him, which was to bring him to meet the Imperial Sky Pavilion's old Pavilion Master and ask him about Dugu Weiwei. Lu Sanjin was quite reliable. The next morning he came to look for Chu Xiu and said that he had already spoken to the old Pavilion Master and that Chu Xiu could ask him any time. Seeing Lu Sanjin's rather excited expression, Chu Xiu asked, "Brother Lu, are you very close to the old Pavilion Master?" Lu Sanjin nodded and said, "Everyone in the Imperial Sky Pavilion thinks that I'm the Pavilion Master's man, but in fact, I'm the old Pavilion Master's man. Although I don't like Xinyuan Wushuang, I have to admit that he's indeed more talented than me. It's not an exaggeration to say that he's 100 times more talented than me. In the past, I was just an ordinary disciple in the Imperial Sky Pavilion. It's all thanks to the old Pavilion Master who picked me out and gave me a chance that I'm in this position today. The Pavilion Master trusts me because he knows how I feel about the old Pavilion Master. The reason I'm helping the Pavilion Master wholeheartedly is also because he was chosen by the old Pavilion Master. These things were not secrets in the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Therefore, Lu Sanjin spoke about them directly. He was the one who invited Chu Xiu to the Imperial Sky Pavilion as a foreign advisor. Naturally, there was no need for him to hide these things. The old Pavilion Master's secluded residence was on a cliff in the corner of the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Perhaps old people did not like things that were too luxurious. Chu Xiu had been to the old Celestial Master's thatched cottage. It was very ordinary. The old Pavilion Master's secluded residence was also an ordinary quadrangle of a farmer's house. However, it was next to a cliff. "Old Pavilion Master, I've brought him here," Lu Sanjin said as he pushed open the door of the quadrangle. He seemed very casual. Inside the courtyard house, an old man with white hair and a sackcloth robe was sitting on a recliner, reading a book. When he saw the two of them enter, he waved his hand, and without the slightest bit of stellar energy leaked out, the breeze seemed to have a mind of its own as it carried two praying mats to their feet. The old Pavilion Master smiled and said, "You're here. Take a seat." Chu Xiu cupped his hands together and said, "Greetings, old Pavilion Master." The old Pavilion Master nodded. He looked at Chu Xiu and said, "Not bad, not bad. I've met Xinyuan Wushuang once. Although he's extremely arrogant, he's indeed a genius. It's not easy for you to defeat him. The ancestor of your line should be proud of you." Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "However, my master has an obsession, and so do I. If I don't defeat the successor of my enemy, I won't even be able to tell the name of my line to others. It's a disgrace." Chu Xiu had gone to great lengths to meet the old pavilion master for this matter. Therefore, he did not beat around the bush and asked directly. The old pavilion master of the Imperial Sky Pavilion was already over 500 years old. He was also an expert in the martial immortal realm. He was someone who stood at the peak of the Daluotian realm. If even the old pavilion master did not know anything about Dugu Weiwei, Chu Xiu would really be at a loss. Chapter 11:13. The old pavilion master looked at Chu Xiu with a complicated look in his murky eyes. Of course, this complicated look was not because of Chu Xiu, but because of the contents of his own memories. Sighing, the old pavilion master shook his head and said, "Although I can't guess who the founder of your lineage is, you people have been cultivating in the mountains and forests every day. Your brains have become stiff from all the cultivation. Why are you so stubborn? If Sanjin hadn't agreed to your request, I really wouldn't want to recall those things. Heh, I've roamed the Daluotian for my entire life, but I really don't want to mention that name." Chu Xiu's heart trembled when he heard the old pavilion master's words. As expected, the old pavilion master knew of Dugu Weiwei's existence. The old pavilion master's eyes were filled with a hint of reminiscence as he said, 500 years ago, although I was still young, I was considered an elite disciple in the Imperial Sky Pavilion. It was at that time that Dugu Weiwei appeared. No one knew where he came from, and no one knew why he was so powerful. After that, we speculated that he might have come from the ancestral lands. The old pavilion master paused for a moment when he mentioned the ancestral lands, but he didn't explain much. Instead, he quickly said, "When he appeared, he was still fighting with someone and caused a huge commotion. However, we didn't manage to find the other person who fought with him." The old pavilion master smiled bitterly and said, "I wasn't qualified to participate in that battle at all. I was sent by the Imperial Sky Pavilion to seal off the Dilua mountain range. Actually, the reason why the battle started was because the people on our side were too impulsive. Their tone was a little too intense. And that Dugu Weiwei's personality was extremely domineering. He killed the person who spoke rudely the moment he arrived. Both sides immediately started fighting." The old pavilion master's eyes were filled with fear as he recalled those events. He pointed to himself and said, "I have now reached the martial immortal realm." However, to the me from back then, martial immortal level experts were no different from immortals. Yet, before that man, I was akin to an ordinary mortal, and was sliced in two by a single slash. That scene was simply capable of driving one insane. The eastern region's cultivators could no longer hold on. They used their trump cards and forced the eastern region's cultivators back to the northern region. The profound heaven realm and the other major forces of the northern domain acted in time, but they still couldn't stop the enemy. In the end, the top factions of the western and southern regions also joined in. Oh right, there were also some primordial sovereigns like you who live in seclusion in the mountains. I just don't know if your bloodline fought with Dugu Weiwei when he first appeared in the eastern region, or if you joined later. However, it's already not easy for your ancestor to survive after exchanging blows with him. He had single-handedly stirred up the entire Daluotian nation, practically making the entire world his enemy. The whole process sounds long, but in fact, it only took less than 10 days. Therefore, apart from the top sects, most people in the world don't know what happened. In the end, everyone used all their trump cards and paid an unimaginable price before we finally won. It was a Pyrrhic victory. At this point, the old pavilion master closed his eyes slightly, obviously not wanting to recall the tragedy of that battle. Lu Sanjin's mouth was agape, his face filled with shock. Even he had never heard of such a thing. Who would have thought that such a terrifying expert would appear among the Daluotian people 500 years ago? What kind of cultivation was that? A reincarnated demon god? Chu Xiu digested these words in his heart. In truth, he felt that the inexplicable fierce battle between Dugu Weiwei and the Daluotian forces was quite normal. For the sects of the celestial absolute plane, they had been staying at home, cultivating themselves and teaching their female disciples. Suddenly, such a formidable wave of energy fluctuations erupted. Not to mention, there was also the appearance of an unknown expert. Naturally, they would have to step forward and question the matter. They were all leaders of sects and sections. Everyone had their own personalities. It was hard to guarantee that they wouldn't have a fiery temper. But unfortunately, the person they were facing was Dugu Weiwei. What kind of existence was Dugu Weiwei in the lower realm? The supreme demon lord who decided the life and death of millions with a single word. With his power alone, he dominated the entire world. Other than Ning Xuanji, who could compete with him? Such an existence could only be looked up to. How could he be questioned? Even in the lower realm, there was no one who dared to question him. Therefore, it was normal for Dugu Weiwei to kill that expert with a single slash. Both sides could be said to have done nothing wrong. However, when they encountered each other, a bloody battle was naturally inevitable. Seeing that the old pavilion master didn't speak for a long time, Chu Xiu couldn't help but ask, "What happened next? Is Dugu Weiwei dead?" Chu Xiu had always suspected that he was the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei. If Dugu Weiwei was really dead, then this was more or less confirmed. This was also what Chu Xiu wanted to know the most. No matter who he was, whether he was Dugu Weiwei or Lin Yi, he was now Chu Xiu. This was what Chu Xiu had always believed. Therefore, he also wanted an accurate answer. The old pavilion master asked in return, "Is your lineage trying to avenge the humiliation by defeating Dugu Weiwei's successor?" Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Anyway, that's what my master said." The old pavilion master shook his head and said, "Then when you go back, you should first persuade your master to let it go, because it's already impossible. Dugu Weiwei isn't dead, he's just sealed. He doesn't have a successor, at least for the next 500 years. Hearing that the old pavilion master said that Dugu Weiwei wasn't dead, Chu Xiu didn't know why, but he actually heaved a sigh of relief. If Dugu Weiwei wasn't dead, then there was naturally no such thing as reincarnation. However, this raised another question. If he wasn't the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei, then who was he? Chu Xiu forcefully suppressed the throbbing in his heart and asked in a deep voice, "Since you can seal Dugu Weiwei, why didn't you kill him? Isn't it good to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots once and for all?" The old pavilion master smiled bitterly and said, "It's not that we can't kill him, we just don't dare to. Dugu Weiwei's various secret techniques are simply peerless. It's as if he can't be killed. Even though his physical body was refined into ashes by the 10,000 Buddha's light sect formation by the Sanskrit sect and the heavenly Luo treasure Rakshasa, his true spirit is still indestructible. He forcibly took over the body of a martial immortal from the Bliss Demon Palace and instantly turned it into his own body. With such a terrifying physical body, no one can be certain what's so special about his primordial spirit. Thus, if we kill him, everyone will think he's dead. However, if he were to use some sort of strange method to come back to life, it will be another calamity for our Daluotian race." Thus, the various sects discussed and decided to use their strongest methods to seal his physical body and primordial spirit. They were planning to forcibly exhaust his lifespan. However, 500 years have passed. Even most martial immortals can't last until now. As far as I know, only a few of the martial immortals who participated in that battle are still alive. In fact, there aren't many people like me who aren't even qualified to participate in the battle. Chu Xiu nodded lightly. As long as the demonic core was not destroyed, the true spirit would not die. The people from Exalted Celestial weren't doing anything wrong. With the undying demonic core, Dugu Weiwei was indeed a near-undying existence. Killing him would be even more troublesome. In that case, where is Dugu Weiwei sealed now? "In the Lingxiao city that you've been to before," the old pavilion master said. Chu Xiu was stunned. He never thought he would be so close to Dugu Weiwei. The old pavilion master explained, "Originally, according to our original plan, Dugu Weiwei should be sealed in the Exalted Divine Palace. However, the exalted divine palace is too important to our Daluotian race, and there can be no room for error. So, after some discussion, we decided to seal Dugu Weiwei in the most important cultivation paradise of High Heaven Sect, the Spirit Heaven Realm. The myriad heavenly sources grand array in High Heaven Sect is extremely powerful, but every time it is activated, it consumes an astonishing amount of materials. Since High Heaven Sect opened it once during the Great Ancient Tribulation, it has not been used in the last 10,000 years. Of course, the materials needed to activate the spirit array were gathered by the various great forces for High Heaven Sect. At this point, the old pavilion master snorted lightly and said, "But I dare conclude that High Heaven Sect absolutely does not need so many materials. They must have embezzled a lot of them." Chu Xiu ignored the old pavilion master's indignation. He just felt that the situation was a little tricky. If it were any other place, Chu Xiu could still think of a way, sneak in, or use other methods. As long as he could meet Dugu Weiwei and ask him about it, it would be fine. But who would have thought that Dugu Weiwei would actually be locked up in High Heaven Sect? This was a little troublesome. During the martial arts exhibition, Chu Xiu had severely injured Xianyuan Wushuang. Although High Heaven Sect could afford to lose, and Qin Baiyuan had publicly announced that High Heaven Sect had lost, it was conceivable what kind of attitude High Heaven Sect would have towards him. Not to mention letting Chu Xiu enter their cultivation paradise. Even if Chu Xiu entered High Heaven City the next time, it was estimated that they would not have a good attitude. While Chu Xiu was lost in thought, the old pavilion master said, "Now that the matter is clear, how are you going to go back and reply to your master?" Chu Xiu smiled bitterly and said, "I can only tell the truth. But this time, I stepped out into the world not only to avenge Yishue's humiliation, but also to temper my heart in the secular world. Therefore, I plan to stay in the world for a few years before going back and explaining everything to Master." The old pavilion master snorted and said, "To put it bluntly, you prime sovereigns are very pretentious." Back then, blood flowed like a river under the hands of that person. Who knows how many experts died? It's already good enough that your ancestral master survived, yet you still want revenge? But I can give you an idea so that you can explain yourself when you return to the sect. At the very least, you will have a way out of this embarrassing situation so that you can openly reveal your name. What idea? The old pavilion master said, "During the battle, that person's weapon was injured by the experts of the sword sect under the heavens at the price of shattering the supreme treasure, the Through Heaven sword. It should have fallen in the southern part of the eastern region, near the southern wilderness. Because of the chaos of war at that time, no one went to look for it. Until recently, my Imperial Sky Pavilion heard some rumors that that person's weapon appeared in the hands of some barbarian tribes in the southern region. If you can bring that person's weapon back, it will be considered as giving an explanation to the ancestral master. Is this enough of a way out of this embarrassing situation?" Chapter 11:14. The old pavilion master's words stunned Chu Xiu. The weapon he was talking about should be listened to spring rain, but it was actually damaged? That was a supreme demonic armament created by the heavens and the earth, and it had been nourished by Dugu Weiwa's own power for a very long time. It was definitely stronger than the broken formation in Chu Xiu's hands. Yet it had actually been damaged. From this, one could well imagine how intense that battle had been. However, at this time, Chu Xiu also understood the old pavilion master's meaning. He narrowed his eyes and said, "Old pavilion master wants me to go to South China?" Lu Sanjin wanted to say something but was stopped by the old pavilion master with a wave of his hand. He looked at Chu Xiu and said directly, "Yes, that's what I mean. In fact, if you're an ordinary guest, His Excellency Emperor Sky can directly order you to go. However, you're Sanjin's good friend and Gu Zun's successor. I don't want to deceive you, so I'm telling you this. For the Emperor Sky Pavilion, the situation in South China is a bit tricky, and we can't find anyone to deal with it for the time being. Your strength and identity can. However, although it's tricky, I didn't lie to you when I told you that that person's weapon had appeared in the hands of those barbarians. Moreover, you're going to the southern barbaric land as my Emperor's Sky Pavilion's guest, so the benefits that you deserve will not be reduced. Chu Xiu didn't ask what was so troublesome about the southern barbaric land. He merely rubbed his chin and asked, although the Emperor's Sky Pavilion doesn't dominate the eastern region, it's still a top-notch sect in the eastern region. Is it lacking people now? The old pavilion master smiled bitterly. Lacking, we've always been lacking. You're an Imperial Sky Pavilion guest, and you're representing the Emperor's Sky Pavilion to participate in the martial arts exhibition. You should understand the gap between our Emperor's Sky Pavilion and High Heaven sect. In the past few hundred years, our Emperor's Sky Pavilion has always been in a state of shortage. Even among the younger generation, Sanjin is the only capable one. 10,000 years ago, the territory controlled by the Emperor's Sky Pavilion was about this big. Even now, it's still this big, but its power has declined. Of course, we don't have enough people. Since you appeared in Fanglin County, you should have seen Jianghu. That kid was also promoted by me when I was still in power. Although he is a little overly cautious, he has both strength and ability. He kept complaining to me and wanted to be transferred back to the Imperial Heaven Pavilion. He said that it was enough to leave a true fire spirit refinement realm martial artist in Fanglin County. His thinking was still too simple. What did Fanglinjun rely on to be so peaceful? He relied on his heaven and earth mystic enlightening cultivation base and the Imperial Sky Pavilion's influence. The sky was high and the Emperor was far away. Strength would always be ranked before prestige. If we really send a martial artist of the true fire spirit refinement realm, he might be easily taken over by those sections. Beside him, Lu Sanjin's expression was a little strange. Previously, Fanglin province was peaceful. However, ever since Chu Xiu's suggestion to Jianghu, it might not be peaceful anymore. Chu Xiu pondered for a moment and nodded. No problem. I'll go to the southern barbaric lands. The old pavilion master waved his hand and said resolutely, all right then. You'll be the county governor of Jianghu County, which is near the southern barbaric lands. I'll get Li Wuxiang to inform all the martial artists of the Imperial Sky Pavilion after that. Chu Xiu nodded. Just as he was about to leave, he thought of something and asked, what about the previous county governor of Jianghu County? If I were to take over his position and offend someone, it would be an undeserved calamity. The old pavilion master looked deeply at Chu Xiu and said, you don't have to worry about that. The previous county governor of Jianghu County is already dead. Chu Xiu choked for a moment but did not say much. He left the small courtyard with Lu Sanjin. Chu Xiu did not care about the rewards that the Imperial Sky Pavilion had promised him. He did not lack these things now. The thing that really attracted Chu Xiu was Ting Chunyu. Although Chu Xiu already had the formation breaking technique that came from the same source as Ting Chunyu, if Ting Chunyu could fuse with the formation breaking technique, it would improve the trump card in Chu Xiu's hands. Seeing the backs of Chu Xiu and Lu Sanjin walking out, the old pavilion master smiled bitterly. Since when did the Imperial Sky Pavilion fall to the point of scheming against a young man? However, he was helpless because the Imperial Sky Pavilion really had no one else they could use. Chu Xiu had the strength to defeat Shenyuan Wushuang, which proved that he had the strength comparable to an expert in the heaven and earth profound enlightenment realm. Moreover, he was Gu Zun's successor. Although some big sects might not pay much attention to this identity, it also represented Chu Xiu's background. No matter what, Gu Zun's successor always had an expert in the martial immortal realm as his backer. Therefore, it was actually suitable to send Chu Xiu. The old pavilion master had already thought of this idea after Lu Sanjin told him that Chu Xiu wanted to see him yesterday to inquire about Dugu Weiwei. That was why he spoke to Chu Xiu so quickly, as if he had already prepared a draft. However, he did not know that the things he mentioned were exactly what Chu Xiu needed. After walking out of the small courtyard, Lu Sanjin said to Chu Xiu apologetically, Brother Chu, I'm sorry. I didn't know the old pavilion master would say this to you. Although he, Lu Sanjin, was not a straightforward person, he would not do such a thing to scheme against his own people. Although he and Chu Xiu were not best friends, at least they were on the same side. It was somewhat inappropriate to do this. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "There's no need to do this. The old pavilion master's idea is good. If we take back that person's weapon, we will be able to answer to the ancestral master. I agree to this matter, and it has nothing to do with Brother Lu or the old pavilion master. To put it bluntly, if I don't want to, even the Imperial Sky Pavilion can't force me." Lu Sanjin nodded. Chu Xiu was right. Although he was a foreign elder, he was still a successor of Primordial Venerate. The Imperial Sky Pavilion could use him, but they could not make use of him. Otherwise, it would be equivalent to offending a martial immortal. By the way, what's so tricky about Nanman? It seems that you don't recommend me to go. Lu Sanjin smiled bitterly. This elder brother was really open-minded. He only started to ask after agreeing to it. It's hard to explain in a short time. I'll take you to a place first. As he spoke, Lu Sanjin pulled Chu Xiu to a side hall in the Imperial Sky Pavilion. There was a huge sand table in the hall. The area built on it was the territory controlled by the Imperial Sky Pavilion, the entire eastern region, and the places connected to it. Lu Sanjin said, "This was built when the Imperial Sky Pavilion first entered the Daluotian territory. Every time we conquer a place, we start to build a sand table and restore the terrain and so on here. The Jianghu County that you're going to is located at the border between the eastern and southern regions. It's also the southernmost part of the Dilua mountain range in the eastern region. It's filled with mountains and dense forests, and it has the most ferocious beasts. There are also many barbarian tribes there. By the way, you should know about the barbarian tribes, right?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "I don't know." Lu Sanjin smacked his head and said, "You bunch of primeval venerables are really impressive. You only know how to cultivate all day long. No wonder your cultivation base is so strong." It was hard to tell if he was mocking or praising. Then he explained to Chu Xiu, "Speaking of these barbarians, we're the ones who have let them down. You can say that they're the indigenous people of the Daluotian territory. Many cultivators who have never been to the southern region or the depths of the Dilua mountain range have always thought that there were no Daluotian people in the beginning. Actually, they're wrong. Humans are the most intelligent of all creatures. There are so many ferocious beasts in the Daluotian territory. Naturally, there are also humans. However, after we entered the Daluotian territory, not only did we start killing ferocious beasts, but we also killed many of these barbarians. Our living space was compressed to the extreme. It's a little unethical to do such a thing, so we didn't publicize it. If you know about it, you know about it. If you don't know about it, it's better if you don't." Lu Sanjin scratched his head. He still had a sense of shame. After all, what his ancestors had done in the past was no different from bandits. Lu Sanjin pointed at the barbarian territory and said, "Now, most of the barbarians live in the southern region, as well as in the undeveloped depths of the Dilua mountain range. Your Jianghu County is right next to that place." At this time, Chu Xiu suddenly said, "Why not kill all of these barbarians?" Lu Sanjin laughed bitterly and said, "There are many reasons. One of them is that these barbarians are not powerless to fight back. They still have some strength. Their martial arts are very strange. To be more accurate, they shouldn't be called martial arts. They're all kinds of witchcraft and secret techniques. They're very difficult to deal with. If we were to forcefully exterminate them, even if all the Daluotian forces joined forces, they would inevitably suffer some losses. Also, the Daluotian territory is vast. Even after tens of thousands of years of development, this territory is enough for us to use. There's no need to force these barbarians into desperation. The last reason is that some sects are hypocritically saying that killing too much is harmful to the harmony of the heavens. They're against this kind of killing." At this point, Lu Sanjin said disdainfully, "The ones who say the most are the monks from the western region. When they first came to the Daluotian territory, they killed many barbarians as well. In fact, they were the ones who killed the most. Because those barbarians worshipped all kinds of messy gods, they were condemned as heretics by the monks and exterminated immediately. Just because they found an excuse to kill, they think they're merciful? Do they think they're saints? I can't stand this." Lu Sanjin seemed to have a strong opinion of the monks from the western region. After cursing them for a while, he said to Chu Xiu, "Therefore, the most troublesome thing for the Jianghu county governor is to deal with these barbarians. They don't care if you're from the Imperial Sky Pavilion or anyone else. In their eyes, you're a foreign race that deserves to be killed. It's impossible for you to be as carefree as Jianghu. Another troublesome thing about Jianghu County is that it's next to Cold River City. Cold River City has just risen. As a force that doesn't have an ancient legacy, Cold River City's territory is the smallest. They're also the most aggressive. It's not the first time they've had conflicts with the Imperial Sky Pavilion. The previous county governor died during the Southern Barbarians' riot. He was plotted against badly. However, to be honest, although those one-track-minded barbarians have strange methods, they shouldn't be able to kill the county governor who used to be an elder in the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Therefore, the Imperial Sky Pavilion suspects that Cold River City was behind that incident. However, although we suspect it, we don't have any evidence. Chapter 11:15. After listening to Lu Sanjin, Chu Xiu could imagine how complicated the situation of the entire southern wilderness was, but he was not worried. Chu Xiu did not go there to share the burden of Imperial Sky Pavilion. He mainly went to find Ting Chunyu and think about how he should enter High Heaven Sect and meet Dugu Weiwei. Imperial Sky Pavilion did things swiftly and decisively. The next day, the news had already reached Li Wuxiang. Li Wuxiang directly announced this matter in front of the Imperial Sky Pavilion's senior executives. After that, all the senior executives of Imperial Sky Pavilion looked at each other, not knowing what the old pavilion master meant. If it was under normal circumstances, everyone would definitely object to letting Chu Xiu be a county governor. This was not just a matter of trust, but also involved things such as strength, qualifications, and so on. Giving this position to an honored guest who had just joined Imperial Sky Pavilion and had reached the true fire spirit refinement realm was simply a joke. However, everyone knew that Jianghu County was a hot potato, and no one wanted to go there. Therefore, after the death of the previous county governor, Li Wuxiang personally went to the southern wilderness and killed a lot of people. Although it could be considered as revenge, he did not choose the position of the next county governor. Now, throwing an honored guest like Chu Xiu over there seemed to be a bit of a trap. Zhong Qiushui also frowned and could not figure it out. At this time, Li Wuxiang turned his head to Zhong Qiushui and asked, "Deputy Pavilion Master, do you have any doubts?" Zhong Qiushui shook his head and said lightly, "No, I agree." Chu Xiu was someone Lu Sanjin had brought along, and Lu Sanjin was the old Pavilion Master's man. He also relied on Li Wuxiang when he did things, so no matter how one looked at it, he and Chu Xiu did not seem to be on the same side. At this time, if Li Wuxiang and others were to send Chu Xiu to Jianghu County to be the county governor, then if Li Wuxiang and others had good intentions, it would be a trap for their own people. He could not be bothered to care. If Li Wuxiang and the others were to play dirty tricks with Chu Xiu, then when Chu Xiu was really miserably cheated, he might be able to pull him to his side. So no matter what, he had no reason to object. Seeing that nobody objected, Li Wuxiang made a decision and said, "All right then, it's decided. After Chu Xiu, he'll be the Imperial Sky Pavilion's Jianghu County's county governor." After saying that, Li Wuxiang called Chu Xiu over alone and gave him some words of encouragement, but they were all just polite words. Li Wuxiang didn't know what to say. From his point of view, the old pavilion master's move seemed to be a scam. However, he didn't know why Chu Xiu would agree to it. Therefore, he could only say some official words to encourage Chu Xiu. In the end, Li Wuxiang passed a token to Chu Xiu and said, "This is the Imperial Sky Pavilion's secret order. At the same time, it represents your identity as the county governor. I've already informed the local cultivators of the Imperial Sky Pavilion in Jianghu County about your resignation. You can also bring some cultivators over to the headquarters. There might not be enough cultivators there." Li Wuxiang was being tactful when he said this. Not only were there not enough cultivators in Jianghu County, but they were also missing more than half of them. During the barbarian riot previously, Jianghu County had already lost a portion of their people. When the Jianghu County's Imperial Sky Pavilion cultivators saw that this place was dangerous, they used all sorts of connections to transfer them back to the headquarters or other counties. In the end, there were only a few people left. Chu Xiu asked, "Is there anyone who's willing to go?" Although Li Wuxiang didn't say it explicitly, Chu Xiu understood what he meant. Li Wuxiang's expression was slightly awkward. He thought about it and said, "Let Lu Sanjin help you pick a few people. It's the sect's order. Even if they don't want to go, they have to go." Lu Sanjin was considered reliable. Li Wuxiang asked him to pick people, so he chose 2 true Fire Spirit Refinement Realm cultivators from the Imperial Sky Pavilion's core forces and over 10 real Pellet Realm cultivators to follow Chu Xiu. These people belonged to Li Wuxiang, the pavilion master. Although the number of people was a little shabby, and they were a little unwilling, they could only grit their teeth and accept the order from the higher-ups. Before leaving, Lu Sanjin called everyone over. He pointed at a tall and sturdy middle-aged man and said, "This is Qin Zhong. He used to guard the Imperial Sky Pavilion for over 50 years. He then pointed at a slightly older old man and said, "This is old Mr. Su Fengshan. He used to follow 6 county governors and is very experienced in handling the affairs of the underworld." Chu Xiu nodded. He could tell from the 2 people that Lu Sanjin had chosen that he was indeed attentive. Although Qin Zhong was a gatekeeper, in reality, how could a person who could guard a top sect like the Imperial Sky Pavilion be an ordinary person? He must be someone with extraordinary looks and strength. This Qin Zhong looked like a piece of good material for a hired thug. As for Su Fengshan, he was clearly an experienced old man in the underworld. Perhaps Lu Sanjin was afraid that Chu Xiu did not have the experience to manage his subordinates and was afraid that he would not be able to control them, so he sent Su Fengshan. The 2 of them cupped their hands at Chu Xiu and greeted, "Greetings, young Master Chu." Although their attitude was respectful, there was some dissatisfaction in their tone. It was normal when one thought about it. Jianghu County was a fire pit, and whoever went there would be unlucky. They did not want to go in the first place, but now they were forced to jump into the fire pit with Chu Xiu. It would be strange if they were happy. Chu Xiu did not care about those things. He cupped his hands at Lu Sanjin and said, "Brother Lu, I'll take my leave then." Lu Sanjin nodded and said, "Brother Chu, have a safe journey. I wish you success." After leading these people on their journey, Chu Xiu immediately rushed to Jianghu County at the fastest speed possible. Along the way, Qin Zhong and Su Fengshan were not in the mood to talk to Chu Xiu because they were not in a good mood. However, Chu Xiu could not be bothered to talk to them either. He only cared about the journey, which made Qin Zhong and Su Fengshan feel a little uneasy. When it was time to rest at night, Qin Zhong quietly walked to Su Fengshan's side and secretly transmitted his voice. "Elder Su, what do you think this kid is doing? Is it because the higher-ups think highly of him and want him to go to Jianghu County? Or is it because someone doesn't like him and wants him to go there?" Su Fengshan scratched his head and said, "This old man can't see it clearly now. Right now, Jianghu County is very chaotic. Everyone knows this. Even Heaven and Earth Mystic Realm experts are not willing to go there, let alone others. However, this young Master Chu is said to be the successor of a Prime Venerable, so his status is naturally noble. There's no reason for the higher-ups to trick a Prime Venerable's successor. We are all personally chosen by Elder Lu. Judging from his attitude, it doesn't seem like he's being targeted. Strange, really strange." Qin Zhong frowned and said, "Then what should we do? Since we've been singled out to jump into the fire pit, we should have a plan. But look at him, he hasn't even said a word along the way. What is he thinking? He doesn't even know what's going on. I heard that these Prime Venerable successors have been cultivating in the mountains and forests since they were young. Have their brains gone bad from cultivating?" Su Fengshan said in a low voice, "Be careful with your words. This young master is very close to Elder Lu and is also the successor of a Prime Venerable. He even defeated High Heaven Sect's Xianyuan Wushuang. His strength and status are not something we can compare with. I know you're a little unhappy about going to Jianghu County, but you should be careful with your words. Don't offend this young Master Chu. Qin Zhong nodded. Although he didn't seem to mind, he still remembered Su Fengshan's advice. Since Chu Xiu wasn't going to say anything, he could only let them speak first. Su Fengshan cautiously walked to Chu Xiu's side and asked, "Young Master Chu, do you have any plans for going to Jianghu County?" Chu Xiu asked in response, "Why do I need a plan? Is there anything I need to plan for in Jianghu County?" Su Fengshan was taken aback. He said, "There are many things. For example, the previous county governor has just passed away, and the position of county governor has been vacant for a few months. The people's hearts are not stable. Also, after the uprising of the barbarians, although Pavilion Master killed a lot of them, there will definitely be others who will cause trouble. Cold River City is so close to Jianghu County. They might come to cause trouble." Now, even Su Fengshan couldn't figure out if this person was really muddle-headed or just pretending to be muddle-headed. Chu Xiu pointed to himself and said indifferently, "Is there a need for a plan for these things? I am the county governor of Jianghu County. I will kill anyone who disobeys me. Those barbarians aren't of our race, so they must have ulterior motives. If they dare to cause trouble, I will kill them as well. Jianghu County is the Imperial Sky Pavilion's territory. Whoever dares to cause trouble will be killed as well. Is there a need for a plan for such a simple thing?" Su Fengshan was dumbfounded when he heard this. He simply couldn't find words to describe his feelings. Just listen to this. Are you even human? His temper was considered good. However, when he heard Chu Xiu spouting nonsense, he was so infuriated that he scoffed and turned to leave. When Chu Xiu saw Su Fengshan's action, he did not say anything else. He was not pretending to be a fool in front of Su Fengshan. He was really planning to do this. When he was in the lower realm, he had forces by his side. He had to consider the conflicts between various forces, the consequences, and other things. Therefore, he fought openly and secretly, and there were all sorts of schemes. However, this was the Daluotian continent. Chu Xiu did not plan to sell his life to the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Therefore, he could do as he pleased without any reservations. At this time, if he could speak with his fists, he would speak with his fists first. If he could solve the problem by killing one person, then he would not waste any more words. Moreover, if Ting Chunyu was really in the hands of the barbarians in the southern barbaric land, it was basically impossible for Chu Xiu to get her without killing them. As for Su Fengshan and Qin Zhong, he was too lazy to explain anything to them. They were sent by Lu Sanjin, and their roots were in the Imperial Sky Pavilion headquarters. They could maintain absolute loyalty, so Chu Xiu only needed them to be obedient. The group continued on their way, but the atmosphere became more awkward. Even the dozen or so real pellet state martial artists didn't communicate with Chu Xiu. The group seemed to be divided into two groups. However, while they were on their way, Chu Xiu suddenly realized that someone was watching him. That feeling was the same as when he was in Lingxiao City. Chu Xiu tried to check several times, but he didn't find anyone. He believed in his spiritual sense, but the person who spied on him obviously had better means. Chapter 11:16. After being spied on twice in a row, Chu Xiu's vigilance had risen to the extreme. The most important thing was that he didn't find anyone on both occasions. One had to know that Chu Xiu's spiritual sense could be said to be quite powerful. He had once pushed the heaven's sun gazing at air skill to the peak by burning his spirit. Although he couldn't replicate that state now, it also allowed Chu Xiu to obtain a stronger perception. As a result, he used the heaven's sun gazing at air skill to deduce the person who spied on him, but there was no clue at all. This was a little scary. The person who spied on him, at least in terms of mental strength, was definitely stronger than him. After finding no clues, Chu Xiu continued to lead the people on the road, but he was always observing the surroundings. However, the spying gaze never appeared again. Su Fengshan, Qin Zhong, and the others watched Chu Xiu nervously looking around. They didn't know what was going on, and they didn't dare to ask. They thought that this young master was crazy again. Jianghu County was close to the southern barbarian land. It should be said that a part of Jianghu County's land was in the southern barbarian land, and it was surrounded by dense forests. When Chu Xiu arrived at Jianghu County with his people, the scene he saw along the way was completely different from the other counties in the eastern region. The other counties in the eastern region, such as Fonglin County, had been developed very well. After entering Jianghu County, it was like entering a prefecture surrounded by dense forests. Often, they had to walk on a small path for half a day before they could see a prefecture that was protected by a tall city wall. The Jianghu County's prefectural governor's office was located in the Tsangnan Prefecture, which was located in the center of the county. This prefecture looked rather grand, even more so than the Anzhou Prefecture of Fonglin County. Chu Xiu could even see traces of arrays on the city walls. The warriors in Tsangnan Prefecture were also very different from the warriors in Fonglin County. All of them had a trace of faint evil spirit. It was conceivable that this place was not so peaceful. After entering the city, Su Fengshan glanced around and frowned. He wanted to say something, but he hesitated. When Chu Xiu saw his expression, he asked calmly, "Elder Su, is there something wrong?" Although Su Fengshan was somewhat dissatisfied with Chu Xiu, he was old and shrewd. He didn't want to offend Chu Xiu. When he heard Chu Xiu's question, he immediately said, "Something is wrong." Normally, a prefecture like Tsangnan Prefecture, which was directly under the jurisdiction of the prefectural governor, should have guards at the entrance. As you can see, young master, the city gates are empty. I have no idea how those fellows from the county governor's manor arranged it. Even if the prefectural governor wasn't around, how could the vast Jianghu County not have a steward? As far as I know, there are about a dozen or so deacons in an ordinary prefectural governor's manor. Even if Jianghu County lost more than half of its people, there should be at least 2 or 3 left. Chu Xiu nodded and did not say anything else. He waved his hand and headed straight for the prefectural governor's manor. At this moment, there were dozens of cultivators in the prefectural governor's manor. There were 3 of them who were in the true fire spirit refinement realm. The 3 of them were either frowning or indifferent. One of them was even taking a nap with his eyes closed. The frowning middle-aged man looked at the other 2 and said, "Hey, Lord Prefectural Governor is about to enter the city, right? Shall we go and welcome him?" This middle-aged man was Xin Hui, the Jianghu County deacon. He was a local rogue cultivator who had joined the Imperial Sky Pavilion because he had done many things for the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Therefore, the other deacons had gone back to the headquarters through their connections. His biggest connection was in Jianghu County, so how was he supposed to find someone? The indifferent person was a strong man with dark skin who did not look like a person from the Central Plains. His name was Wuxia, and he was a mixed blood between a human and a barbarian. As half of his blood flowed in his veins, he was very popular among the barbarians in the south. Therefore, the previous prefectural governor had to rely on him when dealing with the barbarians. Although the prefectural governor was dead, even if there were 10 more prefectural governors, they would still put him in an important position. Therefore, he had an indifferent attitude. When he heard this, he waved his hand casually and said, "All right, let's go and welcome him. Sun Qianxing, are you going?" Sun Qianxing, who was taking a nap, had a sinister look on his face. When he heard this, he said calmly, "What's the rush? Shen Hui, the prefectural governor has only died a few days ago, and you're already eager to cling to your new master?" A trace of anger appeared on Shen Hui's face, but he did not dare to say anything. Sun Qianxing was the head of the Jianghu County deacons. He had stayed in Jianghu County his entire life, so he was the only one who could sort out the complicated situation in this place. When the previous prefectural governor arrived, he was also a little dumbfounded by the many troublesome matters that he had to rely on Sun Qianxing to resolve. If Kucha's role was to deal with the barbarians, Sun Qianxing's role was to deal with the entire Jianghu County. Therefore, while everyone else was in a hurry to transfer them away, Sun Qianxing had no intention of doing so. In other counties, he was just an ordinary deacon. However, in Jianghu County, his role was greater than the prefectural governor's. Even the prefectural governor had to be polite to him. He had heard that the new prefectural governor was not a heaven and earth elemental opening realm expert, but a young man who had just stepped into the pugilistic world. This made Sun Qianxing look down on him. Although the new prefectural governor was the successor of a prime venerate, so what? In a place like Jianghu County, even the eastern region wayfarer Lu Sanjin would have to consult him if he came. Therefore, his attitude was naturally not like Shen Hui's, who looked like he could not wait to curry favor with his new master. At that moment, someone outside reported that the new prefectural governor had arrived. Sun Qianxing said in surprise, "He's here so quickly?" He went straight to the prefectural governor's manor the moment he entered the city. "Let's go and welcome him." Shen Hui kept mumbling behind him, "I told you to go out earlier." "Great, now that the new prefectural governor has to wait for us, we might get blamed." Sun Qianxing could not help but snort disdainfully when he heard this. The new prefectural governor was a greenhorn, while he and the others were veterans in Jianghu County. The new prefectural governor could only rely on them, so why did he have to be so humble and let others look down on him? When the group walked out, Chu Xiu and the others were already waiting in front of the hall. Although they knew that the new prefectural governor was the successor of a prime venerate and was not too old, they were still not used to seeing Chu Xiu's young age. "Greetings, prefectural governor." Chu Xiu waved his hand and said indifferently, "No need for formalities. Let me ask you something. Why is there no one guarding the Cangnan prefecture's city gates?" Shen Hui was stunned. He thought that the new prefectural governor would blame them for not going out to welcome the new prefectural governor. As the saying goes, a new official has to make drastic changes. He would definitely find an excuse to vent his anger. Who would have thought that the first thing he asked would be such a trivial matter? Kecha shrugged and said, "I didn't arrange it. I've never cared about the Cangnan prefecture's affairs." Sun Qianxing frowned and said, "My lord, the previous prefectural governor has just passed away and the people are still unsettled. How would they have the time to care about guarding the gates?" Chu Xiu stared at Sun Qianxing and said, "So you're saying that you don't want anyone to guard the gates?" Sun Qianxing snorted coldly and said, "My lord, this isn't a question of whether or not to do so. You've just arrived in Jianghu County and there are some things you don't understand. What we should be doing now is investigating the cause of the previous prefectural governor's death and reassuring the people. Are you teaching me how to do things?" Chu Xiu directly interrupted Sun Qianxing and took a step forward. He narrowed his eyes and said, "I only have one question for you. Why is there no one guarding the Cangnan prefecture's gates? Right is right, wrong is wrong. I don't want to hear a second answer." An intense pressure descended. Even Shen Hui and the previously indifferent Kecha were stunned. They never thought that Chu Xiu would make things difficult for them over such a small matter. Sun Qianxing gritted his teeth. He could admit defeat now, but he didn't want to. Sun Qianxing had managed Jianghu Prefecture for so many years and had contributed more than the prefectural governor. If it wasn't for the fact that his strength was slightly weaker and he hadn't stepped into the heaven and earth elemental enlightenment realm, the position of prefectural governor would definitely have been his. Therefore he had his own pride. He could cooperate with the prefectural governor and do his best, but the condition was that the other party had to show him enough respect and courtesy. Chu Xiu's strength was obviously the same as his. It was only because he was Gu Zun's successor and was a good friend of Lu Sanjin, the eastern region wayfarer. Moreover, the other party was so overbearing. Why should he admit defeat? The chaos in Jianghu Prefecture had just ended and more than half of the 10 wardens had run away. He was the only one who could stabilize the situation in Jianghu Prefecture. Therefore, he was certain that even if he offended Chu Xiu, the Imperial Sky Pavilion would not touch him. They might even ask Chu Xiu to consider the bigger picture. Therefore, Sun Qianxing replied stubbornly, "Sir, what do you mean by this? Why are you being so overbearing over such a small matter? This matter is urgent. How can there be any right or wrong? Do we have to report to the Imperial Sky Pavilion's headquarters even when we have a meal without the prefectural governor around?" Chu Xiu reached out and grabbed the hilt of his saber at his waist. He said calmly, "Wrong answer. I've said it before. I only want an answer of right or wrong. I'm the prefectural governor of Jianghu Prefecture. You'll do whatever I ask you to do. This is what a subordinate should do." You didn't answer the question and talked back to the superior. You can't even explain yourself. What use do I have for you? Sun Qianqing's expression changed the moment he saw Chu Xiu holding his saber. However, he still did not believe that Chu Xiu would attack him here. Even among the Daluotian, a person in the true fire spirit refinement realm would be considered an expert. In a large sect, he would be a core force like a warden. In the pugilistic world, it would not be a problem for him to establish his own sect like Lin Yazi. In the past, there had been punishments and demotions for prefectural governors to attack their subordinates. However, there had never been anyone like Chu Xiu who attacked him over such a small matter. However, in the next moment as Chu Xiu swung his saber, the sky was filled with saber gleams that shrouded everything. No matter what kind of power or the laws of heaven and earth they were all neatly sliced in half in front of this saber. Sun Qianqing did not even have the time to pick up his weapon. The qi and blood around him erupted and surged. However, before he could fully deploy his defenses, the invincible saber had already landed. His protective qi was torn apart like a piece of paper. His powerful qi and blood also withered instantly. Sun Qianqing didn't even have the chance to scream before he was killed. Chapter 11:17. After Chu Xiu killed Sun Qianqing, the entire prefectural governor manor fell silent. Everyone was stunned. Su Fengshan and Qin Zhong, who were standing behind Chu Xiu and prepared to watch Chu Xiu make a fool of himself, no longer had the mood to do so. They felt that they were the real joke. When Su Fengshan asked Chu Xiu what he was going to do, Chu Xiu said that he would kill those who disobeyed him. He thought that Chu Xiu was talking nonsense. Now, it seemed that Chu Xiu was serious. Sun Qianqing was a capable, influential, and prestigious warden in Jianghu County. Yet Chu Xiu killed him just like that. Wasn't he afraid of being reprimanded by the higher-ups? Wasn't he afraid that he wouldn't be able to do anything in Jianghu County? Qin Zhong secretly rejoiced. At the same time, he was grateful for Su Fengshan's warning. Fortunately, Su Fengshan had told him to be careful with his words. Otherwise, if he were to talk back to Chu Xiu, he might be killed as well. At this moment, Shen Hui and Kecha were dumbfounded. They had been in Jianghu County for so many years, but they had never seen someone like Chu Xiu who killed someone without hesitation. Was he here to be the prefectural governor, or was he sent by a rival sect to destroy the Imperial Sky Pavilion? Kecha was half a barbarian, so he did things like a barbarian. He respected powerhouses the most. Although Chu Xiu was at the true fire spirit refinement realm, the fact that he was able to kill Sun Qianqing, whose strength was on par with his, showed that his combat strength was definitely beyond his imagination. Therefore, Kecha lowered his head to Chu Xiu, expressing his obedience. Shen Hui shuddered and hurriedly bowed. "Please forgive us, sir. We were in the wrong. We slacked off because we thought the prefectural governor wasn't around. We didn't send anyone to guard the gate. Please forgive us, sir." Shen Hui was really frightened by this blade, and he even said a few words of forgiveness in succession. Chu Xiu said calmly, "There was no prefectural governor in the past, but there is now. Go, send 2 people to guard the gate. Remember, from now on, I am the governor of Jianghu County. I only want one thing: obedience. As long as you can do this, the rest is up to you." After saying that, Chu Xiu waved his hand and led everyone into the hall. Shen Hui and the others were once again dumbstruck. That was it? That's it? Shen Hui couldn't help but look at Sun Qianqing's corpse on the ground. He shuddered and cursed inwardly. He could now see that what Chu Xiu wanted was very simple, and that was people who were obedient. In the end, Sun Qianqing thought too highly of himself, but he met Chu Xiu, who didn't take him seriously at all. Now he was killed. Sun Qianqing died a wrong death because he had no idea what Chu Xiu wanted. He had only come to Jianghu County to look for Ting Chunyu. The position of county governor was just to use the Imperial Sky Pavilion's name. The development of Jianghu County had nothing to do with him. What did the previous county governor's death have to do with him at all? Cold River City was eyeing Jianghu County covetously. As long as they didn't provoke him, he naturally wouldn't provoke them. Since that was the case, what use was Sun Qianqing to him, Chu Xiu? A fellow who couldn't even be obedient was worse than trash. He could only be killed. As for the Imperial Sky Pavilion, Chu Xiu wasn't worried at all. It could be said that the old pavilion master begged him to get his position. When the news got out, it wouldn't matter even if someone from the Imperial Sky Pavilion was displeased with him for killing people and wanted to remove him from the position of county governor. In any case, to Chu Xiu, the time he had to go back and forth was enough for him to get Ting Chunyu. After everyone entered the hall, Chu Xiu looked at them and said calmly, "I'm Chu Xiu. All of you just have to remember one thing. Jianghu County is under my jurisdiction from now on. That's enough. Now, introduce yourselves." The corners of everyone's mouths twitched a little. Among all the county governors in the Imperial Sky Pavilion, perhaps only this lord would use such a peculiar self-introduction. Kucha touched his forehead and bowed at Chu Xiu. This was the barbarian tribe's unique etiquette. He said respectfully, "I'm Kucha. Because half of my blood runs in me, I'm in charge of dealing with the barbarians in Jianghu County. Of course, to me, no matter which tribe I'm from, I'm just a deacon of the Imperial Sky Pavilion. I'm loyal to the Imperial Sky Pavilion." Shen Hui glanced at Kucha. This fellow didn't have this kind of attitude in the past. He was always indifferent to everything he did. Even when the previous county governor ordered him to do something, he always procrastinated. When had he ever been so respectful? Now that he had encountered a ruthless character, he behaved more obediently than the other. At this moment, Shen Hui also stood up, bowed, and said, "I'm Shen Hui. I'm familiar with all aspects of Jianghu County. I'll do whatever you want me to do, Lord." Chu Xiu nodded. Su Fengshan and Qin Zhong introduced themselves again. After everyone knew each other's names, Chu Xiu then asked, "The Imperial Sky Pavilion said that a saber has appeared in the hands of the barbarian tribe in Jianghu County. Did you send the news to them?" Everyone was stunned when they heard this. No one had expected Chu Xiu's first question to be about a saber. Sun Qianqing had said that the first thing Chu Xiu should do after taking office was to investigate the real cause of the previous county governor's death. Calming the people's hearts was the most important thing. Although Sun Qianqing was bickering with Chu Xiu, the truth was that it should be like that. However, now that Chu Xiu asked about a saber and did not mention anything about the previous county governor at all, none of them could react. Su Fengshan wanted to remind Chu Xiu, but he swallowed his words when they were at the tip of his tongue. This person could not even be described as obstinate and self-opinionated. He was simply like a tyrant. He would not listen to anything anyone said. All he wanted was obedience. Although everyone present had their doubts, nobody dared to voice them out. Kucha said carefully, "This matter was indeed reported by Jianghu County. It happened not long before the barbarian riot." Chu Xiu knocked on the table and said, "Tell me about it." Kucha cleared his throat and said, "This is what happened. Because the previous county governor was slightly older, he was more stable and gentle. His attitude toward the barbarians was the same. Therefore, both sides often conducted trade and so on. I also represented the county governor's office to the depths of the Dilua Mountains to trade with the barbarian tribes. I have half the blood of the barbarians in me, and I know most of the barbarian tribes' languages. Therefore, they treated me quite well. That time, I accidentally discovered that a tribe called Haslu was acting strangely. That's right, Haslu means the cheetah that runs amok in the bushes. The Haslu tribe seemed to have obtained a saber. It was said that it was left behind by their ancestor, the ancient devil god. With this saber, they would be able to restore the glory of their ancestors and expel the outsiders. These tribes, especially those that lived in the depths of the Dilua Mountains, were very hostile to us. The Haslu tribe was one of the most hostile. I spent a large amount of money to bribe a person from a tribe that was on good terms with the Haslu tribe. He secretly memorized the appearance of the saber and came back to describe it to me. It was a scimitar that looked like a full moon. It exuded an astonishing demonic aura and sharpness. However, it was damaged with cracks and nicks. There was also a line of text on the saber, which he also recorded. Although the text was different from the Daluotian language, it was of the same origin. I could understand some of it. It was definitely not the language of the barbarians. I could only understand a few words. It seemed to say something like, spring rain in the small building. Perhaps the barbarian had remembered the wrong strokes, causing the other words to be unclear. These barbarians often cause trouble. Hearing them talk about restoring the glory of their ancestors, I knew that they were definitely up to something. After I discovered it, I felt that something was wrong and reported it to the county governor. Because the barbarians hadn't made a move yet, the importance of this matter wasn't that high. Therefore, it was reported to the headquarters along with a pile of other information. When Kocha finished saying all these things in one breath, Chu Xiu could already be sure that the person holding the saber was listening to the spring rain in the small building. The demonic saber from the lower realm was actually regarded as some kind of ancestral divine weapon by these barbarian tribes. It was also very ridiculous. Chu Xiu nodded and said, "The others can go. Kocha, stay behind. Oh, by the way, clean up the corpses outside." Everyone left as if a heavy burden had been lifted off their shoulders. Kocha smiled bitterly in his heart. Chu Xiu's ferocity was too great. He really didn't want to stay here alone with Chu Xiu, but he didn't dare to refuse. Chu Xiu knocked on the table and asked, "How strong are the barbarians in the southern barbarian land? For example, the Haslu tribe that you mentioned?" Although Chu Xiu was asking about the barbarians, Kocha felt that he was actually concerned about the saber. However, Kocha didn't dare to ask too much. He thought for a moment and said, "The strength of these barbarians isn't considered weak. It can even be said that they are very strong. Not to mention all the barbarians added together. Just the barbarians in my Jianghu County's Fanwei County aren't that easy to deal with. The martial arts system of these barbarians is different from ours. Although they also have some powerful warriors who can use various secret techniques to be on par with martial arts powerhouses, it's not easy to compare. Moreover, they also have many secret techniques that require many people to use together. The combined power is not small. I can only say that among these barbarian tribes, some of the smaller tribes are comparable to sects with true fire spirit refinement realm martial artists. As for the larger tribes, all kinds of strange secret techniques can be used to kill and injure heaven and earth mysterious enlightenment realm powerhouses. Fortunately, most of the tribes near my Jianghu County are some small tribes. Only those in the depths of the Dilua mountain range are those big tribes. Chu Xiu continued to knock on the table and asked, "That Haslu tribe, is it big or small?" Kocha smiled bitterly and said, "It's also a big tribe. Otherwise, I wouldn't have bribed other barbarians to secretly inquire. If I go by myself, I might not be able to come back." Chapter 11:18. The strength of the barbarians from Jianghu County was actually within Chu Xiu's expectations. After all, even the Imperial Sky Pavilion had died in their hands. During the barbarian tribe's uprising, a heaven and earth enlightening realm cultivator had died. Naturally, their strength could not be weak. Therefore, it would not be easy for Chu Xiu to get rid of them. "What's the situation with the barbarians now?" Kucha said. After the barbarian tribe's uprising, the pavilion master personally led people here and annihilated 3 large barbarian tribes. He forced several barbarian tribes in the Dilua mountain range to join forces and beg for mercy. The pavilion master did not want to start a war with the barbarian tribes, so he did not continue to kill them. Since then, the barbarian tribes have become much more well-behaved and have not caused any more trouble. However, all these years, they have always been like this. When they become stronger, they will start to cause trouble. After being killed, they will become well-behaved. It's a typical example of people who don't learn their lesson. When Kucha said this, his tone was filled with disdain. He did not seem to think that he was actually a barbarian. Chu Xiu nodded and said, "All right. Tomorrow morning, accompany me to the border of the barbarian tribes to investigate the situation." Kucha smiled bitterly again. It seemed like he was being targeted by this lord. However, he could only nod and agree. On the second day, Chu Xiu gave some instructions to the others and brought Kecha out of the city. This caused everyone to be at a loss for words. This lord was also very capricious. On the second day of his appointment, he left without caring about anything. In reality, what else could Chu Xiu care about? He could not be bothered to come up with strategies for the Imperial Sky Pavilion to increase their strength. This time, there were 2 Imperial Sky Pavilion cultivators guarding the city gate. When they saw Chu Xiu, they quickly saluted him. Chu Xiu walked out of the city gate with Kucha. Just as he was about to let Kucha lead the way, he suddenly felt an extreme sense of danger surging toward him. His body abruptly shifted several hundred feet to the left, and a pitch-black arrow that was burning with world-destroying flames shot toward him at a rapid speed. Triple City-destroying arrow. Chu Xiu could never have imagined that he would be able to see the Triple City-destroying arrow in the Daluotian Empire. However, this arrow was a little different from the Triple Link City destruction arrow. The power of nirvanic extermination was a little less, and the flames of annihilation had a little more charm, but it was 90% similar. Wherever the arrow passed, any power began to evaporate under the tyrannical world annihilation fire. The person who shot that arrow had definitely reached the heaven and earth profound opening. Chu Xiu dodged the arrow, but for some reason, the sense of danger in his heart did not dissipate. In an instant, Chu Xiu's heaven's sun gazing at air was pushed to the extreme. At this moment, Chu Xiu finally saw that the triple annihilation arrow from before was actually an illusion. The world-destroying fire fluctuated in the void, but there was nothing there. The real arrow was less than 100 feet away from him. What a terrifying illusion! At this moment, Chu Xiu was shocked. He cultivated the heaven's sun gazing at air, and his spiritual sense was almost at the peak among those of the same level. Even so, he had been deceived without realizing it. To be more precise, he had not fallen for an illusion, but the person who had made the move had reached the level of materializing illusions into reality. Kecha and the 2 Imperial Sky Pavilion cultivators who were still at the city gate were also staring at the fake Triple City destroying arrow with a look of horror on their faces. The colorless ceiling Pa-Madra shone brightly with Buddhist light, and space distorted. The Triple City destroying arrow twisted and exploded under the force of Chu Xiu's Madra, but the power it emitted sent Chu Xiu flying more than 100 feet back. It's the heavenly net treasure again. That heretic's cultivation method is really annoying. Ripples appeared in the void, and a monk wearing a black robe embroidered with all kinds of mysterious runes appeared in front of Chu Xiu. He was said to be a monk because he was bald and had a string of pitch-black prayer beads hanging on his body. The other party's strength was indeed at the heaven and earth mystic illumination realm. Moreover, the powerful waves emitted from his body were not weak. At the very least, he was much stronger than Shang Tianliang and Ling Yunzi, who were at the heaven and earth mystic illumination realm. When they saw the appearance of the heaven and earth mystic illumination realm expert, Kecha and the 2 Imperial Sky Pavilion disciples immediately closed the city gate, activated the formation, and hid on the city wall. At the same time, they immediately went to inform the other Imperial Sky Pavilion cultivators in the city. It was not that they did not want to help Chu Xiu on purpose, but in such a situation with their strength, they would be killed with a single slap from the other party. Chu Xiu had only been appointed on the second day, and his attitude was so overbearing. It would be strange if they were loyal to Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu did not care about them. Instead, he squinted at the strange monk and said, "Who are you?" "You are the one who spied on me in Lingxiao City. You were also the one who spied on me on the road. I don't remember offending such an expert." The strange monk laughed strangely and said, "I am Moriha, the palace master of the Illusion Sky Emperor Palace of the Sanskrit sect's Vishnu Temple. Kid, I don't care which branch of the primeval venerables you are, and I don't care whether you are the prefectural governor of the Imperial Sky Pavilion or not. Now, tell me, where did you get your world annihilation flame?" When he heard that the other party was from the Sanskrit sect, Chu Xiu secretly cursed himself for being careless. There was actually no problem with Chu Xiu's cultivation technique. There was no need to talk about the cultivation techniques from the lower realm. Even if he used Dugu Weiwa's cultivation technique, he would still have an excuse. He could totally say that this was something that the founder of his bloodline had imitated when he fought against Dugu Weiwa. After 500 years of deduction, he had learned it. He planned to know himself and know his enemy, and he would never be defeated. However, Chu Xiu had a special cultivation technique. It belonged to the Sanskrit sect's Shiva Temple's Mahakala Temple's World Annihilation Flame. The Sanskrit sect was still a major sect in the Western region, and it was the top existence in the entire Daluotian world. In fact, Chu Xiu had been tricked by the 9 Phoenix Sword sect's records. According to the records, the Daluotian sect's experts would not rashly enter another's territory. One reason was that the Daluotian world was vast, and the other was that it was easy to cause unnecessary misunderstandings. Who would have thought that Chu Xiu would be so coincidental? The eastern and western regions were so far apart, but there were people from the Sanskrit sect here to observe the ceremony, and they just happened to see Chu Xiu use the World Annihilation Flame. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, attacking without even asking, "Is this the style of your Sanskrit sect?" My ancestor was very famous before the ancient calamity, and he had interacted with many experts and exchanged cultivation techniques. What's so strange about knowing your Sanskrit sect's World Annihilation Flame? That was given to my ancestor by your Sanskrit sect's ancestor. Mariha's face darkened, and he scolded, "Bullshit. The Mahakala Temple was built by my Sanskrit sect to deal with the life transformation pavilion of the Heavenly Luo Treasure Temple 5,000 years ago. The World Annihilation Flame was also created to restrain the pure Lotus Buddha light of the Life Transformation Pavilion. Could it be that your ancestor could travel through time and learn the World Annihilation Flame 5,000 years later?" Chu Xiu fell silent. It was very embarrassing to be exposed. Mariha said coldly, "Tell me, where did your World Annihilation Flame come from?" Since 500 years ago, since the Mahakala Temple disappeared, the inheritance of the World Annihilation Flame has only been in the hands of a few people in my Sanskrit sect, and it's impossible for it to be leaked. Tell me, did you discover the Mahakala Temple? I advise you to tell me obediently, or else when I cripple your cultivation and drag you into the God-bewitching realm, that feeling of sinking into a boundless purgatory won't feel good. Don't think that I won't dare to touch you just because you're the successor of Primogenitor and the Imperial Heaven Pavilion's prefectural governor. My Sanskrit sect has been investigating the whereabouts of the Mahakala Temple for 500 years, and I've also taken over this matter for 100 years. Anyone who tries to stop me will be the enemy of my Sanskrit sect. It's not like my Sanskrit sect hasn't killed martial immortals before. Ever since 500 years ago, the Mahakala Temple took the clues found by their Sanskrit sect, bypassed the few large sects in the southern region, and tried to enter the legendary ancestral land. They never returned, and there were no signs of life. The Sanskrit sect investigated this matter for 500 years, and the final result was that the Mahakala Temple didn't perish in the hands of the few large sects in the southern region, nor did it perish in the hands of the barbarian race. Before attempting to enter the ancestral land, they even contacted the Sanskrit sect once, but there were no signs of life after that, and they disappeared without a trace. No one knew if they had successfully entered the ancestral land, or if some other accident had happened. The Mahakala Temple carried the missions of the Sanskrit sect, as well as all kinds of secrets regarding the ancestral land, so even after 500 years, the Sanskrit sect didn't give up on searching for the Mahakala Temple. The various palace lords under the 3 main halls, Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu, were all existences in the heaven and earth mystic insight realm, and they took turns to search for clues of the Mahakala Temple. And even without considering the matter of the ancestral land, the Mahakala Temple was also the strongest divine palace of the Sanskrit sect. Back then, the Sanskrit sect was severely suppressed by the heavenly Luo Buddha, so the experts of the Shiva Palace, who had the strongest battle power, joined hands and researched the world-extinguishing fire, and created the Mahakala Temple to restrain the heavenly Luo Buddha's purifying lotus light. So among all the divine palaces of the Sanskrit sect, the Mahakala Temple was the strongest, and its palace lord had even reached the realm of half-step martial immortal, and there were even 5 experts in the heaven and earth mystic insight realm in the entire Mahakala Temple. So many experts had gone and never returned, and no one knew if they were alive, and no one knew if they were dead, and no one knew if they were dead, so no matter what, There had to be an explanation. Moriha had already taken over this matter for more than 100 years, and he had more or less visited the 4 regions of the north, south, east, and west, but he still didn't have any clues, so he was already prepared to return to the western region to take over this matter. Going to High Heaven City to watch the martial arts exhibition was just a sudden impulse of his, and he did not expect that he would actually see the world extinguishing fire in the martial arts exhibition. Ever since the disappearance of the Mahakala temple, it had not been rebuilt. Although the palace lords could cultivate the world extinguishing fire, it was only a supplementary cultivation, and it was absolutely impossible for it to be taught to outsiders. The origin of the world extinguishing fire in Chu Xiu's body was self-evident. He did not expect that at the last moment of his handover, he would actually encounter a clue. This was an opportunity that the heavens had given to him, Moriha. After leaving High Heaven Sect, he had secretly followed Chu Xiu, but because there were people from the Imperial Sky Pavilion around, it was not easy for him to make a move. Although he had been spying on Chu Xiu along the way, he was also afraid of attracting the experts from the Imperial Sky Pavilion, so he had been enduring. It was only when Chu Xiu arrived at Jianghu County that he confirmed that there were no heaven and earth mystic insight experts from the Imperial Sky Pavilion in Jianghu County that he showed himself and made a move. Chapter 11:19. When Chu Xiu heard the words 500 years ago, his eyes immediately shone with a divine light. Things that he didn't understand before, he understood now. Existences like the Royal Sky Pavilion and the Sanskrit sect not only knew about the ancestral land of the lower realm, they also knew that there were people in the ancestral land. The only difference was that the Sanskrit sect should have found some clues and possibly returned to the ancestral land. However, this clue was in the southern barbaric land. It didn't belong to the Sanskrit sect's sphere of influence. They didn't dare to go with great fanfare, so they only sent the great Obscurus deity palace to secretly go to the lower realm. And from what Moriha said, he shouldn't be sure that the great Obscurus deity palace had already successfully gone to the lower realm. So, he questioned where Chu Xiu got the world extinguishing flame, and not to confirm the relationship between Chu Xiu and the lower realm. The people from the Sanskrit sect didn't expect that the great Obscurus deity palace had actually succeeded. Without the sky connecting key, they had brought everyone to the lower realm safely. However, it was fate. It could only be said that the Sanskrit sect was simply unlucky to the extreme. If the great Obscurus deity palace had descended a bit later and encountered the Kunlun devil cult being annihilated, the righteous path of martial arts had suffered great losses, and the heavenly gates had been almost killed by Dugu Weiwei, the great Obscurus deity palace would have been an invincible existence. A half-step martial immortal and 5 profound understanding realm experts were enough to dominate the pugilistic world of that era. And if the great Obscurus deity palace had descended a bit earlier and missed the period of the rise of the Kunlun devil cult, as long as they didn't provoke the heavenly gates or the righteous path of martial arts, nothing would have happened. In the end, the great Obscurus deity palace had chosen the most coincidental time to descend. The Kunlun devil cult was at its peak, Dugu Weiwei dominated the pugilistic world, Ning Xuanji was peerless, and the righteous path of martial arts also produced many experts. That period of time was the most chaotic period in the pugilistic world, but it was also the strongest period. There were many people who could defeat the great Obscurus deity palace. It could only be said that they were unlucky. At this time, Chu Xiu also thought of something that he had neglected before. Chu Xiu had been pondering over how to return to the lower realm. In the beginning, Chu Xiu had placed his hopes on the heavenly gates. He was now certain that the Elysium was connected to the Daluocean. As long as he found the point of contact, he might be able to return. However, he had forgotten that Mahakala deity palace had brought an entire deity palace's people to the lower realm. Since they could go down, then he could naturally do so as well. At this moment, Chu Xiu looked at Moriha with a hint of killing intent in his eyes. Since Moriha had investigated the great Obscuro deity palace for more than 500 years, he definitely had detailed clues regarding the great Obscuro deity palace in the past. If he were to get rid of him, he might be able to obtain the clue that Mahakala Deity Palace had gone to the lower realms in the past. Morihei wanted to continue interrogating Chu Xiu, but he saw a hint of killing intent in Chu Xiu's eyes. This caused Morihei to be stunned. What was this guy trying to do? Shouldn't he be thinking about how to escape? Yet, he still dared to reveal killing intent towards him? At this moment, Chu Xiu's formation-breaking sword was unsheathed. The resplendent sword light covered the heaven and earth, and everything was sliced apart by this sword. It was as if nothing in the world could block the sharpness of Chu Xiu's sword. Seeing that Chu Xiu still dared to take the initiative to attack, Morihei coldly snorted and said, "Stubborn fool, you're courting death." Kocha, who was watching the battle from above the city gates, could not help but gape. This prefectural governor was a little too fierce. He was facing an ultimate expert at the Heaven and Earth Elysium realm, yet he still dared to take the initiative to attack. Kocha did not know how to describe this. Morihei's black monk robes fluttered, and as he formed seals with his hands, the surrounding heaven and earth distorted in an instant. With the two of them as the center, the area within several hundred feet was completely distorted into a huge rainbow bubble. No one could see what was happening inside. At this moment, Su Fengshan and the rest of the people in the prefectural governor's office rushed over. When they saw this scene, they were shocked and quickly asked Kocha, "What's going on?" Kocha smiled bitterly and said, "I don't know either. I saw this guy sneak an attack on the prefectural governor as soon as I left the city. He's a Heaven and Earth Elysium realm expert. I didn't even dare to go near him." Everyone present was silent as well. They did not even have the right to interfere in a battle of this level. Su Fengshan and Qin Zhong exchanged glances and smiled bitterly in silence. They knew that this wasn't going to be a good errand. However, they did not expect Kangwu County to be so dangerous. In broad daylight, someone had attacked the Imperial Sky Pavilion's prefectural governor outside the Imperial Sky Pavilion's prefectural governor's office. Was there no law here? Moreover, the attacker was a Heaven and Earth Elysium realm expert. The two of them did not even dare to imagine such danger. At that moment, Chu Xiu, who was in the huge bubble, furrowed his brows. The break formula's saber intent slashed through thin air, and Morihei's figure was no longer in front of him. The huge bubble was a kind of domain. Chu Xiu's formation-breaking technique, primal attraction, should have been the best at restraining domains. However, the domain that Morihei set up was extremely special. It was not a domain that normally controlled the Heaven and Earth Elysium, but a spiritual domain. The illusion Heavenly Palace of Vishnu Palace was most proficient in illusory techniques and spiritual attacks. As the palace master, Morihei had cultivated his illusory techniques to the extreme and had reached the stage where he could condense illusions into reality. Formation breaking could turn all energy into extreme Yin energy, but this kind of completely illusory spiritual energy could restrain the effect of formation breaking. His opponent was a Heaven and Earth Elysium realm expert, but he was restraining Chu Xiu's weapon. At this moment, Chu Xiu was already at a disadvantage. Morihei's figure appeared around Chu Xiu, in all directions, as if there were thousands of incarnations. These figures said in unison, "Don't struggle, don't resist, obediently tell the origin of the world-extinguishing fire. In this place, the sky is high and the emperor is far away, no one will come to save you." Countless voices opened their mouths at the same time. It was like a devil's voice piercing the ears, resounding in Chu Xiu's mind, shaking his head until it hurt. Letting out a long breath, Chu Xiu raised the heaven's sun gazing at air to the extreme. The figures in front of him began to blur and distort, and only one figure was the clearest. The next moment, the misty slash fell, and time and space were frozen. That figure was also frozen in the void by the misty slash. When Chu Xiu's saber fell, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. In the next moment, the saber momentum reversed, and a black lotus had appeared under Chu Xiu's feet. The black lotus bloomed, and the lotus petals were like hot blades. They were stained with the world-extinguishing fire and surged towards Chu Xiu. The misty slash blocked the lotus petals. At the same time, Chu Xiu's body also bloomed with wisps of world-extinguishing fire. He used the world-extinguishing fire to deal with the world-extinguishing fire, extinguishing it. However, compared to Chu Xiu's world-extinguishing fire, Moriha's world-extinguishing fire had a trace of spiritual pressure that could melt the soul. After all, he was a supreme expert in the ethereal enlightenment realm. After learning the world-extinguishing fire, he would not cultivate it step by step. Instead, he added his own martial arts understanding into it. Your reaction is quite fast. I can feel that you have cultivated a spiritual secret technique of the Taoist lineage. TSK, cultivating the three lineages of Taoism, Buddhism, and demonic at the same time. Who exactly is your lineage? Unfortunately, no matter how much you know, it's useless. Is it real or fake? Is it an illusion or is it real? How can you be sure that what you see is real? The figure that Chu Xiu had locked onto began to blur. It completely distorted and disappeared, while Moriha's figure appeared in another direction, looking at him with a faint smile. Seeing this scene, Chu Xiu's heart immediately sank. Moriha could be said to be the most troublesome enemy he had ever encountered. With Chu Xiu's current strength, even if Chu Xiu went to the lower realm to fight with Su Ci, Rama, and the others, Chu Xiu would still dare to take action. He also had the strength to fight. Moriha's strength and foundation might not be as good as Su Ci and Rama's, but with his strange illusory technique, few warriors of the same level could match him. To be more precise, it should be said that there was no way to deal with him. Moriha waved his hand, and in the entire space, countless black lotuses bloomed. In each black lotus, there was a world annihilation flame. The densely packed black lotuses surged towards Chu Xiu. Right now, he couldn't tell if these things were real or fake. Chu Xiu snorted coldly. He formed a seal with his hand, and the Buddha Dharma idol appeared behind him. On the left side of the Buddha Dharma idol was solemn and dignified. Buddha's light shone, and Vairocana shone through the ages. On the right side, there was a furious and ferocious Mahakala demon god with 3 eyes, destroying the world. In an instant, the scorching Buddha's light and the cold world annihilation flame spread out in all directions. That power even caused Moriha's expression to change slightly. He had actually combined the world annihilation flame with a Buddhist cultivation method. This was definitely not something that could be done overnight. At this moment, Moriha had a faint guess in his heart. Something must have happened to the people of Mahakala Demon God Palace, but they were discovered by the ancestral master of this kid's faction and obtained the world annihilation flame. After many years of research, he had reached this level. He did not suspect that this was created by Chu Xiu. How old was this kid? How could he fuse the power of 2 attributes so perfectly? But so what if he was a Guzun? A Guzun in the martial immortal realm was indeed an existence that the large sects were not willing to provoke. However, the premise was that there was no conflict of interest between them. Now that Chu Xiu's faction had clues about Mahakala Demon God Palace in their hands, even if his master was a Guzun, the Sanskrit sect must force the truth out of him. At this moment, under the burning power of Vairocana Demon God and Mahakala Demon God, the endless black lotuses had already disappeared. However, these things were all fake. Everything was fake. Chu Xiu's attack was simply a waste of energy. Moriha smiled proudly. Just as he was about to say something, he suddenly discovered that a crack had been torn in his domain. The sky wept and blood rains suddenly descended. Chapter 11:20. Moriha's illusion was so powerful that even Chu Xiu could not do anything about it. It seemed real and illusory. You thought it was fake, but it turned out to be real. You thought it was real, but it turned out to be fake. Under this kind of illusion, Chu Xiu would be exhausted to death sooner or later. Therefore, after he condensed Vairocana and Mahakala, he immediately used the devil-wailing Heaven Great Compassion mantra while enduring the huge consumption of power from using 2 supreme martial skills at the same time. The power of the Great Compassion mantra came from the extreme malice and all kinds of negative forces in the world. Any illusion was meaningless in front of it. When the sky cried and blood rain fell, everything had nowhere to hide. Looking at the demonic image in the air tearing apart the heavens and earth and grabbing at him, Morihei smiled coldly and said, "Using two supreme martial techniques at the same time, your physical body is very strong to actually be able to withstand this kind of impact. But do you really think that I'm only good at illusion and can't compete with the warriors of the same level in other areas?" As Morihei's voice fell, a chaotic fog shrouded his whole body and stretched for hundreds of feet. Like a giant python, it wrapped around the devil's arm. The chaotic fog revealed itself and gradually became very clear. It turned into 1,000 giant pythons and completely wrapped around the devil. This was the divine beast worshipped by the Vishnu temple, the giant snake Ananta. It was said to be the companion of Vishnu, one of the three gods of Sanskrit. Although Morihei was good at illusions, he was, after all, an existence in the mysterious realm of heaven and earth. He also knew some of the other martial arts and secret techniques of Sanskrit. Even if the power of the Great Compassion Mantra was tricky, it would not be able to hurt him. But at this moment, Chu Xiu's body suddenly burst out with boundless qi and blood. A blood pillar shot up to the sky. He actually directly used the blood demon transformation technique and slashed at Morihei crazily with the formation breaking tool in his hand. Taking advantage of the devil wailing heaven Great Compassion Mantra tearing the illusion, Chu Xiu could only take advantage of this time to pose a threat to Morihei. Morihei frowned. He could see that Chu Xiu wanted to fight with his life, but in fact he did not want to fight with his life. It was not that he was afraid of death. He did not believe that Chu Xiu could pose a threat to him. He was worried that Chu Xiu would die. He still wanted to force the whereabouts of the Mahakala Palace from Chu Xiu. If Chu Xiu died, how could he do that? Therefore, Morihei could only try his best to resist the pressure of the demon god's giant hand formed by the Great Compassion Mantra while resisting Chu Xiu. He could not be too heavy-handed because he was afraid that if he really killed Chu Xiu, his only clue would be gone. Finally, when the power of the Great Compassion Mantra reached its limit, Morihei laughed and said, "What other trump cards do you have now? I already said that if you surrender and tell me everything, you might be able to keep your life. Now that your qi and blood have been completely burned, there is no meaning in living. I will be a good person. After reading your memories, I will send you on your way." Morihei waved his hand. In an instant, a large python formed from chaotic qi directly swept Chu Xiu's figure. The divine light in Morihei's eyes soared. Everything around him was like a vortex that overlapped and twisted, completely swallowing Chu Xiu. Morihei directly pushed his mental energy to the maximum limit. Only then could he read all of Chu Xiu's mental energy without missing a single bit. But in the next moment, memory fragments that were like a torrent made Morihei's face turn pale. He could not even control his own memories. Those were not the memory fragments of one person, but the memory fragments of dozens, hundreds, or even thousands of people. Morihei did not even have the time to carefully look at the contents of those memory fragments. If not for his extremely strong mental energy, he might have been shocked into an idiot in an instant. How is this possible? This is absolutely impossible. How can there be so many memory fragments of people in a person's mind? At this time, Chu Xiu, who was shrouded by the vortex, showed a strange smile to Morihei. "But I am not human." Morihei's expression instantly changed. However, before he could react, a long saber with a deep demonic aura had already pierced through his heart from the back and pierced through his entire body. In an instant, a powerful demonic qi suddenly erupted. Together with the sharpness of the saber, it tore Morihei's meridians, leaving him no chance of survival. Even though his vitality was completely cut off, Morihei still relied on his powerful mental energy to turn his head. Looking at the pale Chu Xiu behind him, he widened his eyes and said in a hoarse voice, "When did it start?" "You said it. What's real and what's fake, like an illusion yet real? Tell me, when did it start?" Before Morihei could speak, Chu Xiu's hand bloomed with a strong power of nirvanic extermination, completely killing all of Morihei's vitality. Pulling out the saber and throwing Morihei's corpse aside, Chu Xiu immediately heaved a sigh of relief. At this time, his face was as pale as paper. Obviously, his mental energy was exhausted to the extreme. The fake Chu Xiu also dissipated, and a trace of mental energy hid in Chu Xiu's mind. The inner demon side in Chu Xiu's mind. Among all the warriors I have seen, this guy has cultivated his mental energy to the extreme. He can even fuse his spiritual energy into this world to create a state that is both real and fake, a state that seems real and illusory at the same time. Rare, truly rare. Chu Xiu had no time to care about the excitement of the inner demon. His mental energy had been overconsumed, and he had a splitting headache. It was even more serious than the sequela of burning his qi and blood. In Chu Xiu's opinion, the danger of this battle was second only to the time when he faced Jun Wuxian's head-piercing 7 arrows. Chu Xiu's strength was strong enough. If he encountered someone who had just stepped into the mysterious realm of heaven and earth, he could definitely fight with him, and the outcome was still uncertain. If he encountered someone who was stronger than him in the mysterious realm of heaven and earth, such as Ramashutzi from the mortal world, Chu Xiu also had the confidence to deal with him with his many trump cards. However, if he encountered someone like Mariha, who had extremely strong mental energy and could play tricks with illusions, the number of ways that Chu Xiu could deal with him could be counted on one hand. So on the surface, it seemed that both sides were competing with strength, but Chu Xiu had always been attacking his mind. Mariha was too confident. In his opinion, there were warriors who were stronger than him in the same realm, but those who could beat him in mental energy and illusions were unique. Even the existence in the mysterious realm of heaven and earth was like this, not to mention Chu Xiu. Moreover, from the beginning, Chu Xiu's martial arts showed that he was fierce and overbearing, and his strength foundation was extremely deep. He never thought that Chu Xiu's fatal blow to him was actually an illusion. Mariha thought that Chu Xiu had used the 2 strongest martial arts techniques of the double-faced Buddha and the Great Compassion Mantra at the same time. In fact, from that time on, Chu Xiu had injected all his mental energy into the body of the inner demon. Taking advantage of the moment when the Great Compassion Mantra tore open Mariha's illusion domain, he also integrated his mental energy into it and transformed it into the appearance of Chu Xiu. Next, the inner demon began to simulate Chu Xiu's desperate fight with Mariha. In fact, those were all illusions, but the inner demon's ability to imitate was too strong. It had once entered Chu Xiu's primordial spirit, so it could be said that it knew Chu Xiu very well. Even if it was someone who was familiar with him, he would not be able to recognize him in a short time, let alone Mariha. However, for every breath of time that the inner demon existed, Chu Xiu had to consume a part of his mental energy. To maintain this illusion, even if Chu Xiu's mental energy was not weak, he could not maintain it for a long time. If there was any accident, Chu Xiu would be discovered by Mariha, and his plan would fall short of success. This battle was extremely dangerous, and Mariha also became the first expert in the mysterious realm of heaven and earth to die in his hands. It could only be said that Chu Xiu's luck was good enough, and Mariha was unlucky enough, or it could be said that he was still too confident. Perhaps in Mariha's view, to deal with Chu Xiu, a warrior in the true fire spiritual refinement realm, he could do it himself, and there was no need to go back to Sanskrit to find someone. If Mariha was cautious and returned to Sanskrit to gather a group of experts before taking action, Chu Xiu really would not have a chance to fight at all. After resting for dozens of breaths, the pain in Chu Xiu's mind eased a little. He carried Mariha's body back to Tsang'an Mansion. Kecha and the others were at the city gate, but they seemed to have been scared silly, and did not even dare to say a word. Previously, Mariha's illusion domain covered one side of the world, and they could not see anything clearly. Later, they vaguely saw a demon god's giant hand tearing the sky and earth, and 1,000 giant snakes dancing, and other terrifying scenes. Later, when the illusion domain dissipated, they saw the scene of Mariha being stabbed to death by Chu Xiu's saber. It was a shock to their worldview. They had seen the junior succeed the senior, but that only happened to low-level warriors. But now, Chu Xiu actually stabbed a heaven and earth mysterious realm expert to death in front of them, which shocked them so much that they were speechless. Now, there was no one who was not convinced by Chu Xiu. Although the former prefectural governor was also in the heaven and earth mysterious realm, he was already old, and it was still unknown whether he could kill a warrior of the same level. But Chu Xiu, with the cultivation of the true fire spiritual refinement realm, killed a heaven and earth mysterious realm expert in front of them. This show of power was simply 10,000 times better than when Chu Xiu killed Sun Chenqing with his saber. At the same time, they also silently mourned for him in their hearts. If Sun Chenqing had seen this scene today, he would definitely not go against Chu Xiu. Even if Chu Xiu told him that ice was hot and fire was cold, and that his wife was discussing the philosophy of life with other men at home, he would not hesitate to believe it. However, Su Fengshan and Qin Zhong trembled even more. What kind of place was Kengwu County? Even a heaven and earth mysterious realm expert could make a move casually, and he could even be killed easily. They would be experts in other places, but they were really nothing here. When Chu Xiu dragged the corpse into the city, everyone instinctively took a step back, and fear appeared in their eyes. Looking at them, Chu Xiu said calmly, "This person is an enemy of mine, and he's here to avenge a personal grudge. This has nothing to do with the Imperial Sky Pavilion or Kangwu County. Don't worry. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.